We will be starting to discuss in the beginning 10 to 16 Mount Vernon Street. We received a letter requesting withdrawal without prejudice. At 8 o'clock, we will continue the public hearing for 654 Main Street. The majority of that portion of the public hearing is to speak with our consultant, Dennis Carlone, and have conversations with that. If there is time remaining, we will open it to the public to begin that step of the hearing process. Thereafter, we will be going into review ZBA permits, 3 Edgewater Place, and also Lot A, Webster Street, 6A and 6B. Just so the planning board knows, I do anticipate we will be having the public join us for those, a handful of members of the public. 9:25 will be going into the master plan implementation committee. We're going to start dealing with the organization of creating that committee so that the master plan can start getting implemented and followed through by a subcommittee of the planning board leadership. Thereafter that, we'll be talking about Washington Swanton Design Consultants. In our last meeting, we had talked about that we wanted to get some design charrettes going on to help drive some of the aesthetics and the layout of that property, and we have some updates on that. Thereafter, we'll go through new business. To members of the planning board, we had talked about meeting minutes. Those are not quite ready yet for the planning board to review, and those will be followed up on our next agenda. There's still some the town planner is still in the process of reviewing those, as they're pretty comprehensive. So those will be coming in our next meeting, and that is why it is not on our agenda this week, as we previously discussed. So to begin, any updates that you want to go through, Brian, before we move on to Mount Vernon Street?
Sure. One update that happened this afternoon, the Woburn City, so this is related to the Vale, and the Vale is for those who don't know, it's a very large project that has over 1 million square feet of retail and about almost close to 300, almost 300 units of different types of residential units just north of Winchester in the old Kraft Foods gelatin plant. The update for that Vale is related to the access. So the town has been negotiating both with the Woburn City Council as well as lawyers representing Pulte and LCS, which are the first housing developments that are going to be part of this project. And the exchange is essentially that if we don't fight the access off of Forest Street, they will never, in perpetuity, they will never do any type of a driving access off of Sunset. So this is, what everyone had envisioned. So that is coming to an agreement, which is kind of big news as related to the Vale. The only other, I think, note that I had related to the local historic district study committee that we're going to be meeting this Friday. The chair of the historical commission, Jacqueline Menage, is going to be taking over for John Clemson, but John Clemson will be able to make this first meeting in order to reboot the idea of having a local historic district that coincides with the center business district / cultural district that is downtown. So we are not meeting again for about another month until January 12th. So the updates that I'm going to be giving you are going to be through via email, because we're not going to be meeting for a month or so. But that's all I have in terms of updates at this time.
And I was hoping you'd mention it, but I'll mention it. Last week on Friday, the town of Winchester and the planning team for the master plan, which is all members of this planning board, along with Brian and our consultants, Jen Golson, we received the 2020 annual award from the APA Massachusetts chapter for the Comprehensive Planning Award. And they did a YouTube, well, they didn't do a YouTube, but they did a webinar, and they created a video that talks about why our plan won. And actually, it was actually pretty competitive category, is what we were told, is that there are actually a lot of plans that were submitted to that. For us to win the award is exciting. But one of the things they said is that we went above and beyond in the presentation, and how we went above and beyond, and we didn't just look at the categories outlined by the state law, which is what we did, but we went above and beyond and included some additional areas, and how they felt that our plan was inclusive and also the public outreach components and how we reached the public and how much responses we got were impressive to them as well. So when that video is put on YouTube and I can find it, I haven't been able to find it yet, but they said they will be sharing it. I'll share it with the members of the planning board. And Brian, I'll have it available if anyone wants to listen to it. But it goes through about why we won the award. And so congratulations to everyone who worked with us on that master plan and for that award. So that was really positive news at the end of a very tough year for all of us. So thank you very much to my fellow members of the planning board as well for putting up with me as we closed out the master plan. Let's move on to 1016. Go ahead.
This is super quick, but just so everybody knows, I believe our board knows, but are we bringing in, we are going to be joined by one of the Lions family members, is that right? So we can discuss the potential of using flexible zoning at 88 Harvard Street. That's now on the agenda, isn't it, for one of our next meetings?
That is, yes, they have agreed. I did touch base with Brendan Lyons, the son, and for the 12th, they're going to be coming with, one concept where there's a restoration of the current house, and then there's a single next to it, and I believe they want to show a restoration of the house and a duplex next to it. So I think that's what they want to talk about, and they've agreed to the 12th.
That's great, thank you.
All right, so let's move on to 1016 Mount Vernon Street. This currently is not, Brian, just so I do procedure correctly, this is not a hearing, this is a response to a letter, correct? Or do I need to open it as a hearing?
This is a response to withdrawal which does not need to be noticed at this time. So you're not opening up a hearing as far as
the hearing is open.
The hearing is still open. It was continued to it's been continued until now, I guess. I guess you do have to open the hearing then. I mean, we have noticed that we're talking about this withdrawal letter. The address is on it, so I believe we do need to open up the hearing.
Point of order. Was it officially continued to today?
They had asked for a continuance we had given them a continuance of 60 days at the time when they had asked.
The only reason I bring that up is that do we have to give, if we open the hearing up now, do we have to have given prior notice?
I don't think it's a technical question, but I don't actually think we have to open it up. It was a continuance of 60 days, and before those 60 days are up, they're asking us to withdraw.
But it's always continued. It is part of the hearing process, and it was continued to a time certain.
Yeah.
So that, I'm looking through notes.
You mean there was a date we were supposed to talk about it again already?
Yes.
Yeah, we have to continue to a time certain.
We vote. They asked for 90 days, and I believe I can go back through the vote. I believe we gave 60 days.
Yeah, but we continued the hearing as well.
Correct. To 60 days. That's what I'm saying. They asked for a 90 day to talk about in 90 days, and I believe we continued the hearing to 60 days.
Well, I've got notes. As you know, I use a paper calendar, and it said December 8th, and then I scribbled it out. So I don't know if that was supposed to be when we continued it. And then it didn't show up on the agenda, but there was a time certain.
So it was continued until December 8th, and then prior to December 8th, they asked for a 90-day extension, and so that's why it was originally scheduled for the 8th. But prior to that, they asked for a 90-day extension, and we gave a 60-day extension.
Well,
Right.
it's legal, it's not, I wanna use the word legal, not technical, but when we continue a hearing to a time certain, it's to make sure everybody who's interested in the hearing is, especially abutters, know what's going on.
Right. So I don't know that we can technically open the hearing because
Well, it's not opening, it's continuing.
I'm sorry, thank you. Continuing it because we haven't given notice. On the other hand, when the ZBA continues hearings, they don't give notice before each continuation.
You don't, you just need to post 48 hours.
Yeah. So does this count?
This would count is unless we, some reverb here, but is unless we continue to a time certain already. But like I said, I'm looking for the vote. I believe on a specific day, we said 60 days from that day.
Right. So if they were asked, I believe on December 8th is when we made the vote to continue for another 60 days to a time certain.
No.
No, sorry, you're right. It wasn't December 8th. I apologize.
I'm going to interrupt. Nancy, by any chance, do you have the time certain that was continued to, or the motion that was made?
I'm looking.
Thank you.
I mean, this is all, in a sense, moot, since they are withdrawing. But
So it's that everybody who has an interest, and there are some individuals or whatever entities that have an interest, should
Yep.
be aware. It was our November 2nd.
November 2nd. Yep,
Ah.
you got it.
so we continued essentially until January 2nd.
No, we continued to December 8th.
Right.
Oh, so it wasn't 60 days. Oh, never mind.
So, okay, in that case then, that there is sufficient notice that it was on the agenda to open the hearing, in my opinion.
Continue the hearing.
Continue to continue the hearing. Sorry.
I'm not a lawyer.
Or we wait 12 minutes and we wait for town
No,
council.
I'm ready. I'm sorry. I was just trying to unmute myself because my Zoom screen the mute keeps disappearing on me. So that was my delay. I was just going to open it up because it's posted on our agenda. I just wanted a procedure for if I need to go through and open it up. So I'm going to open the hearing for 1016 Mount Vernon Street.
Hang on,
Well,
you're not opening, you're just continuing.
Well, continuing it by continuing it. I'll change my wording. I'm going to continue the public hearing of 1016 Mount Vernon Street. For all those who are here, by your name, as you have signed in through to join us on Zoom, and that is you're officially signing into the hearing. Just so everyone knows going forward that this meeting is being recorded by WinCam, and it is being recorded for the benefit of those who have come just for the hearing. The purpose of the hearing today is to review 1016 Mount Vernon Street has provided a request of the planning board for us to consider or withdraw without prejudice for their application of a third floor addition at 1016 Mount Vernon Street, and the reasoning is due to COVID-19 pandemic. And so since it's just going to be a discussion of the planning board, if we need to open it up to anyone, I will then go through the rules and procedures for the public. But right now it will be a conversation of the planning board. If needed, we will go from there. Members of the planning board, you have read the letter. Any comment?
The
question?
first thing would be to bring up the procedures, because that blocked out. The main issue would be if we wish to accept the withdrawal, it's whether it's with or without prejudice. So, Brian, maybe could you bring up the, I'm sure you have it handy, our rules and regs, but this is, of course, the rules and regs just follow,
I can read it too if you'd like, Maureen. I have it before me.
Yeah, can you
So
share it?
a withdrawal or denial with prejudice assumes that the same or very similar project would be denied and that a significantly different project should be pursued by the applicant. A withdrawal or denial without prejudice assumes that the same or very similar project could be applied for and potentially approved with or without conditions. And The final point is a hearing to determine if a newly proposed project is significantly different from a previous application is warranted whenever a vote is with prejudice occurred for that application. Is item number 14 as part of the Winchester Planning Board's procedures for public hearings for special permit, site plan review, and variances. So those are the three choices. Obviously we could also,
So just
I believe that's out of, it's not appropriate at this point. It's really deciding how to accept the letter with or without prejudice at this point is where we're at as a planning board.
And the question, of course, is really, and I don't remember where this came from, but I know it has to do with a project that's similar, that's different or significantly different, or whether we would want to see or accept the idea without prejudice, which is what the applicant is asking for, how the board would feel, basically having this similar project, the same project or very similar project come back again. And the issue is, to me, should we be subjecting a future board to going through an application that differed in many ways from what was being how we were advised to vote on it. Not to mention the fact that we got a letter from an abutter, which I think is a pretty serious letter. I don't know, Brian, if you have it available. It never was shown in the hearing, but it's really a relevant document. It comes from Tara Realty Trust. This is the trust that owns the Lyceum building, the immediate abutter. Let's see, I'm looking for a date, October 28th. It was sent to the planning board, addressed to Heather K. Von Meering, chair. So, Brian, I think this is relevant. I think this is one of the more important documents that relates to if this board should be accepting this proposal again in the future without basically any significant or substantial changes.
I have a clarifying question though. I thought we gave them feedback. So does that count as the same project if they incorporated the feedback we gave them?
I'll answer, and Brian can amplify, but it's really the board's determination as to what constitutes a change in the project. But let's come back to your question, because that's relevant in a minute. But I think it's, Brian, would you mind, first here's scroll it so we can see the letterhead, so everybody sees what, I mean, the people in the, our audience, so-called, can see. No, can you just show the letterhead first? So this came to the board October 28th. Tara Realty Trust owns the Lyceum building. This is the abutting building to the building that Jack Levitt owns, where he's wanting to add another story. And then if you could scroll to the bottom paragraph on this page, in the event that Tara Realty Trust should decide to restore the Lyceum building consistent with a favorable review by the Planning Board, Design Review, and Historical Commission, such restoration, meaning his at Lyceum building, would completely cover up the apartment windows that are proposed on the third floor of 10 to 16 Mount Vernon Street. A third story on 10 to 16 Mount Vernon would also prevent the Lyceum building from incorporating windows on the side of the Lyceum building facing 10 to 16 Mount Vernon, thereby reducing the economic incentive for creating residential units on the third floor of said historically restored structure. And you can continue, just scroll so people can see the end. I don't know if there's anything more worth reading, but at least let everybody see the rest of the letter.
So I'd like to respond to that.
Yeah.
So first of all, I have no idea whether that statement is backed up by any real, I mean, it's a statement. I don't know if I can take it at face value. It's written by an abutter who may or may not put something on their building in the future. They've certainly not shown any indication that they have wanted to do so in the past. They are trying to keep their options open. They're also doing this, they're trying to essentially reduce the economic viability of the building that were discussed at 1016 Mount Vernon Street. So I think there's a conflict of interest in taking these words on their face. I think it's important that if we're going to use this letter as a basis for a decision, we understand the legal consequences of this. Just because they say that this will reduce their economic viability doesn't say it'll actually do that. So I personally understand their concern, but I am not willing to make a decision without further investigation as to whether that concern has real validity.
Yeah, I also read it to sound like, well, which building do we care more about the economic viability of, right? I mean, that's a concern for either owner.
Well, there is the reality in the zoning bylaw, and it's the zoning bylaw, that there is this right to restore it, which, I mean, it's in the zoning bylaw. So there is this, if he wants to go into court over this project, he would have a very strong case saying he's got the right, or he could be suing the planning board saying, and why are you taking, I mean, the project, basically, if we were to approve it, he would immediately go into court, guaranteed. And I think there's logic, I do, and I don't mind saying that in public. I believe this would be a reasonable lawsuit. So I mean, we could test it, but I won't support it.
Couldn't we actually just say that we accept the withdrawal without prejudice at this time, as the hearing didn't progress far enough for us to determine whether it should be with or without prejudice?
I think that's a valid way of looking at it. We have never heard back from the proponents anything based on the recommendations or the concerns the board raised. So they haven't had a chance to come back and give us an alternative. So I think that if we do want to go with prejudice, then I think it's important we have a separate hearing where they are present, where we can discuss this. So I am happy to go with that, except without prejudice, because I don't think they've had a chance to come back.
I'll just say that because we have recommendations from the design review, from the historical, from the town planner. We have language in our regulations that all ask for these setbacks. Then we've got this additional issue that right now this project shows windows facing the owner facing the property owned by Tar Realty Trust. I don't believe that there's any reason to even accept a project like this in the future. I believe we'd be doing everybody a big service, including the owner actually, by saying this one is not going to fly, and it's time to, we certainly have spent a lot of meetings with Jack Levitt. I don't have any interest in letting this thing keep going. It's taken endless amounts of time, and the board's time is also something that I think is worth a whole lot. So I would prefer to accept the withdrawal, but I would do so with prejudice. And that way, if he wants to come back with a different project, already we've got lots of information for him to work with.
I do have a couple more things to say, but if anyone else on the board wants to say something before I say them, I'm more than willing to wait.
This is Cheryl. I have a technical question just out of lack of experience, but in that document that we were first looking at about with prejudice or without prejudice, it's specific to this address and this building. Is that correct?
Correct, and that plan.
Okay, so it's not a project of this type. It's more a project, as we've seen, in terms of this building, this site, its context, all of that.
Hyper specific.
It is very specific. Okay, thank you.
Brian, I see that Mina has joined us. I'd like to ask Mina a question. Mina, can I ask you a question?
Sure, yes.
I mean,
If it's
so
about a
we,
matter you're just talking about, I may need a little bit of background. But
yeah,
go ahead.
I'm gonna do that for you. So we have um, a, we're in a hearing, and the applicant has requested that we withdraw without prejudice. And I personally feel that we are not far enough along to determine whether it's with prejudice or without prejudice. So what are the options for the planning board at this point to just accept his withdrawal without saying, come back with it as with the same or very similar project or not? And so just so we can close the hearing and go. We're at a point where we can't really offer any more feedback than we already have, because there's not enough information. What would you recommend?
I don't think that's quite fairly stated, Heather, because I think we've got a lot of information. If
you feel you have enough information, it was my question about where I stand. I feel like I don't have enough information to take a position.
Well, let's at least let Mina know what information we have. We have an abutting property where right now you see the word perfection, and they have by right in our zoning bylaw, there you go, that building has the right to restore this building with a third story. That's in our zoning bylaw, so that's a really important point. The current project before us, which is the brick building to the right, is proposing to put another story on all the way to the party wall. So we've got this letter from the owner saying, but that would take away the economic value, the full economic value I would have, which I have under the zoning bylaw, if this project were to go forward. Moreover, in our regulations, we expect a project that goes on an existing building to be set back to minimize its impact on the historic in a historic building. This is one. So you've got two issues. One is that the current proposal before us has covers the entire facade and all the way to the party wall, which would deprive the abutter of his economic value if he were to build that third story by right. We also have a project, the design, which comes all the way out to the main elevation and the side elevation. And under our regulations, it's expected to be set back. So we have a fair amount of information, and I'm saying fine, withdraw, but this project can be denied with prejudice, that we don't want this project in this form ever coming back.
So since we're all explaining what we think of the information we have, I'd like to take my chance to offer my understanding of the information we have. First of all, the proponent came before us, I believe, once to present his plans, or maybe twice.
Oh, we've seen him at least 4 times.
Not with this particular, he did not, this is for this submittal, right? Everything prior to this submittal, he offered to come to the board to speak about it, and the board accepted. It was voluntary on both sides. When he came and actually put a proposal before this board, that's an official thing. So I'm only talking about that. Everything before then was voluntary for both parties. In this particular case, he came before the board. We gave him our considerations and concerns about the project. We have not yet heard back from that proponent as to whether or not they could change things to make it more acceptable to the board. So there's a lot of information I don't have as to whether or not they could come back and make things acceptable to the board. The other thing is I want to point out, and again, I'm not a lawyer, but just because you have a by right ability to build doesn't mean that you can't prevent someone else from building. If you go to any other place in town where you could build a party wall multiple stories higher, it doesn't matter whether the other person has, if both parties can build by right and add another story, they can't prevent the other person from building. So I don't believe that there is a legal issue here where the owners of the building on the left can say, well, we get to build by right, so you can't build up. I don't buy that argument, but again, I'm not a lawyer. I mean, I think the key thing is here, I haven't heard back from the proponent to tell me whether or not they can meet the recommendations of all of the committees who've seen this design. And so I can't say that I have enough information to accept a withdrawal with prejudice.
Yeah, I agree with Dia.
Well, let me say this, because the crux of the matter is that you would be getting a project that's substantially or significantly different, and that's the key. How different can it be? At which point it really should be a new filing.
So, Mina, going back to my question, I don't feel like it needs to be substantially different. I feel that there was a setback issue that we had on the front elevation, which could be done with, but then it's not clear whether it is a similar or not very similar. And so my question is, can we just accept the withdrawal without defining whether it's with prejudice or without prejudice?
Heather, I thank you for the background. This is actually helpful. Just kind of just make sure I understand a few things. This is coming before you because it's in the CBD. That's the nature of what's the nature of the relief they're seeking from you? Is this site plan review? What?
Special permit.
Special permit for FAR.
Okay. So my answer is that if they're asking to withdraw, you're not thereby blessing anything, and they can't, and if it's something they need a special permit for, they'll have to come before you. Frankly, I'm not sure that you'd be entitled to give it prejudice other than that the applicant will have heard the objections or views of one or more or all of the board on particular aspects of the project. So it's prejudice in that sense, but there's been no formal ruling on it, and it sounds like they want to withdraw. Your other option would be to say not to let them withdraw and then deny it, but that would be providing a course for appeal. So I don't think that's in anybody's interest when the applicant wants to withdraw. So I guess that's a long way of saying, yes, I think if you allow them to withdraw, there is no real detriment to the town or the planning board or the abutter, because the project that doesn't have the special permit, it needs to do in its current form, and if they have to come back before you, they have to meet the special permit criteria, whatever they may be at the time. They have a little bit more input on what they might be.
But when, Mina, could they withdraw? I mean, when would the planning board, what would be the argument why we could not, given what we know, which is it needs a significant change. It's going to have to be changed quite a bit. So why wouldn't the signal be, this does not meet our regulations, it does not meet our the zoning in terms of, it cannot satisfy our boards. On the left, it's by right, that building on the left. On the one on the right, it's by special permit. So we've got this party wall issue. So if we believe that this party wall issue is significant, then why would we, what would be the downside of saying this is denied with prejudice? And then that
Ms. Meister, that doesn't quite mean anything in this case. That's why. There's
I don't understand that.
Unless you're saying that they can appeal your decision, which you're trying not to, I believe, I'm not sure why you would deny with, what is that prejudice? Prejudice to whom? Prejudice in what proceeding in the future? Prejudice of what sort? That legally, I don't think has any real significance that it's with prejudice. They clearly have heard the concerns. I will say, I don't know enough about this project, so I don't want to weigh in too far. I would want to hear a lot more from the applicant and their neighbor about the party wall issue. Property rights and the ability to build are not within any land use board jurisdiction. You can't adjudicate property rights, so that may be outside of this board altogether. So that, I'm not sure if if it's a factor in the special permit, the impact on abutting properties, that's one thing. But what I'm hearing is the applicant is saying, I don't want a decision that I can appeal, and I don't want to build under the plan I'm providing now. So by withdrawing, that's what they're getting. They're not getting any additional rights. And they, I think, would be very clear that if the composition of the board is the same and the rules haven't changed and the special permit criteria haven't changed, they'd have to come up with a different plan.
I think that maybe I'm missing something in what you're saying. So we do have this concept of prejudiced and without prejudice written in our hearing, which essentially says that if we accept it with prejudice, that means they cannot come back with a similar proposal, that it has to be substantially different.
Yeah, so
And they're asking to get it to withdraw it without prejudice, so they would be able to come back with a similar proposal.
and so I'm just asking, where is this process outlined? Is this in the board's own hearing procedures?
Yeah, they're on the screen right now. I hope.
I understand, but what is the authority for this?
My understanding is, so these are the three choices we have to vote, right? You approve, deny, or accept with or without prejudice. You can accept the withdrawal, right? And then it outlines what it means when you withdraw with prejudice or without prejudice. But I'm simply asking, can we just accept their withdrawal without defining the prejudice or without prejudice?
I would view that, Heather, I guess I want to come back to the question. I apologize that I'm not prepared to answer this. I was here for the 645 main, but I would just ask, where are these the board's own rules? I mean,
Yes, the answer is yes.
Tell you, I'm not sure, if they're coming for a special permit,
We're in our procedures for public hearings.
Which, by the way,
special
went through council. I don't know which person, Anderson and Krieger, but it did go through council.
in the past 3 years, Maureen?
Yeah.
Please don't start asserting that they've gone through council if they haven't.
They have.
I'm sorry, that's a fact.
I don't, they have, but that's
Yeah,
okay.
August 27, 2019.
Okay, thank you. Well, I can tell you, look, I'm not sure if the denial with prejudice is that they have to change the plans. I guess this is really up to you, whether you believe there's something fundamentally wrong with the plans or not.
I don't know if it
And
matters.
I apologize, but I am not prepared to come in mid-hearing, have something projected on a screen, and weigh in on it. I don't think that's a useful way for you guys to ask this question. I'm not going to lie. I don't understand that. I haven't heard any of the hearing. I don't think you're getting. All I can tell you is it doesn't sound like this applicant wants to move forward with the project right now. I don't particularly understand why you wouldn't let him just withdraw. That would be my advice. That would be the cleanest way to do this.
I think, Mina, and I understand your position, and I guess I apologize for dragging you into this melee. I think everyone would allow them to withdraw. The only question is under the terms of with or without prejudice. I don't think Heather, I believe you wanted to know whether we could accept a withdrawal without saying one or the other, but our procedures clearly say we don't have that choice. We have to, by number 3, we have a choice with or without. So we do have to make a decision.
But it sounds like several of us are fine with the language that's being used, so I wonder if we just go to a vote, we can move on.
I think that
I'm happy to entertain a vote.
Okay, I make a motion that we approve without prejudice.
No, you're accepting.
Yeah, sorry, not approve.
we accept the withdrawal without prejudice.
Yeah.
Is there a second?
I will second that motion.
Discussion?
Yeah, I
All
just want to
in
make it clear that I'm opposed, that I believe this project is flawed in the way it was presented. It doesn't comply with our zoning nor with our regulations, especially with our regulations. It doesn't respond to the recommendations that have come through, or even respond to the comments made at the board in the hearing as the hearing opened. So I believe that while it's worthwhile to have, or accept, I certainly support accepting its withdrawal. I don't believe it's in the interest of the board to bring this thing back in, which could be the same as what we've already seen. I think that's not really a productive use of anybody's time.
All right, those in roll call vote, please.
Hannon, aye.
Jarius, aye.
Meister, no.
Wolf eye.
Von Mering, aye. Passes 4-1 with Meister as the one. I I don't believe I need to close it because that officially closed it. And so let us move on to our next
No, you
agenda.
actually need a vote to close a hearing.
After the vote's been done, just closed
Yeah.
it, withdraw
Yes, you
it, close it. All right.
I move we close the hearing.
I'll second it.
Roll call vote, please.
Shannon, I.
Curious eye.
Meister, aye.
Wolf eye.
Von Mering, aye. Hearing closes on 1016 Mount Vernon Street. Moving on to public hearing for 654 Main Street.
Heather, you mind if I talk for just a minute?
I was gonna open it. Do you want me to open it first?
Oh, sorry, thought you did.
I'll continue it. Nope. Well, we're moving on to the next one. So, welcome to this. I have to read that. If you guys are wondering why I always repeat the same thing, it's part of our procedure. So, welcome to the public hearing. It's a continuation of 654 Main Street. For those who are just joining us, we typically have you sign in if we were in person, but on Zoom, when you sign in, you give your name, and that is your formal way of signing into the hearing. For those who are also just joining, I would like to remind everyone that we are being recorded by WinCam. It is for the benefit of those who've just come in for the hearing. You can also watch this recording if you'd like on the web, and they also broadcast it on their stations. The purpose of this meeting, as I said, is for 654 Main Street. And we are at this point in our procedures. We are going through comments from our consultants in the board discussion component. From here, we will be going into, if there is time this evening, we will be allowing conversations where the audience members ask questions of the applicant or the board. But we'll see how far we get with our consultant discussing design review. If we do open it up to the public, I will go through the procedures at that time for public comment. But at this time, I'm going to invite Dennis Carlone to join us and unmute himself. He had some things he wanted to go over with the board, and from there we'll go based on who I call on. So Dennis Carlone, if you could join us. And Brian, while he's unmuting himself, if you wanted to give an update that you had or wanted to do as well.
Nope, I think you covered it, or just I was going to say very quickly that this evening, Dennis is going to talk about the concerns that he has, and as well as the, not so much the concerns, but also the positive notes of the project, and let him know the direction he thinks we're going to go in. And then take questions from the board specifically. Unclear if we will have time from the public. I think the main portion here is for Dennis to give his critique, and then also to get comments from the board. So just give it away to Dennis, and thank you so much.
Madam Chair, I could do one of two things. I could give a summary of my thoughts, or we could literally walk through the drawings. We'll skip some of them, but walk through the drawings and point out the issues if there are some, or the good solution that has been proposed. It's whatever's best for you and the board.
I think, Dennis, for your message and your information to be as most succinct as possible, you choose what you feel is the best way to go over that. I think would be best. All
right. I would like to try to go through the drawings, because what I did is mark up the drawings, and then after talking to the board, I will write up my comments as you see fit. So I've asked Ted Tolukian, the architect. Go ahead, Ted. You can go to the second page. I've asked Ted.
I just so you know who's driving. It's Brian who's driving. Just so you know.
As I said, I've asked Brian to run the drawings. Brian, thank you. So this, you've all seen this drawing, and in a nutshell, it shows the components of the project. And as I'd mentioned in late winter, early spring, this is a very complex site. And I have to give credit to the development team for working out a solution that tries to deal with many varying issues. as you know, it's in the flood zone. And on Main Street, you can see the ramp system that's there. They've broken it down, obviously, in 3 components, the historic house being an obvious one, and then as they define it, a mercantile building, which is the ground floor retail with housing above on Main Street, and then a residential block on Elmwood. None of the dimensions are generous. What I mean by that is the site's dimensions. It is a tight site. They have to include water storage for flooding. They have to include parking below grade. And in the courtyard, you see 6 trees. Those trees are in soil, which I didn't know until our earlier discussion with the development team on Monday. So this site is, none of the sites in downtown are going to be easy because of their geometry. There are very few rectangular sites. However, this site's got a little bit of everything, and I give the development team great credit for that. Brian, if you could go to the next drawing. So this is their analysis drawing, and I wanted to point out that there's 6 quadrants. I won't go through each one. Obviously, the one on the left is the existing site. The one next to it, toward the right, shows what the zoning allows in height, up to 65 feet. This proposal, I believe, is approximately 52 feet high at its most, but I could be corrected on that. And then you can see a progression of how they try to break down the building to fit in its context. Next, please. Next. Next one, too. So this is a closer view of the building. It'll come back. We need the axonometric. I think the one prior to this. And it shows the components fairly well. The house is somewhat hidden because we're looking at it from the opposite view. And you all know that the building on Elmwood is broken down into more scale with an animated roof, dormers, gables, trying to relate more to the residential neighborhood, the single family and the multi-family housing behind on Vine Street. And then the block on Mass Avenue, on Main Street. Next, please. So, and one more. Thank you. So, one of the focal points of the board discussion focus on the interface, and we'll get closer in later drawings, between the historic house and the wing of the so-called mercantile building, and in particular that top floor where Brian is pointing out. And we discussed that on Monday, yesterday, and it was a fairly quick resolution that the development team will look into continuing the character toward the right. That's right, Brian, thank you. And continue it around that corner so that there is a softer transition in height. And that will be worked on. Another thing that was discussed was the location of the elevator mechanical house and the stair going to the roof. And I would highly recommend any building having a stair to the roof and not having a ladder stair. I was actually a special consultant on a job years ago where a special interior ladder was put in instead of stairs, and a person fell and the owner was sued. And it makes much more sense to have an interior stair. It is without doubt in the right location. I know people are not happy with it. We're going to try and humanize that architecturally, but it's at the knuckle, at the inside of the L. I would imagine Ms. Wolf recognizes that right away. There is another stair. I don't know if you remember where it is, Brian, closer to the single family house. That could have been that's it, good. Little right there. And that would have been a worse impact on the adjoining houses. Thank you. Next. So this is a view down Elmwood, and you can see the transition from a more residential street to Main Street. And the residential portion is quite well done. We have some questions on details, but we're not at the detail stage. One of the things we talked about, where you can see part of it there, are the parking garage doors and the treatment of that. The architect is proposing that it would be a wood-faced garage door and treatment on either side. We'll get to the first floor of that building a little later. Next. This is a detail of the top. Next. So here you see the garage door, both doors actually, and just to the right you see, right next to the garage door, you see the residential entry. We'll get a better view of that later. One of the comments I brought up is that this is the pedestrian level. People will walk here, and we don't have a lot of windows and activity to sort of bring a little more human scale to the facade. So we talked about options. One option is perhaps there'd be frosted glass in the door or clear glass in the garage door. The sidewalk is fairly narrow. I think the sidewalk has to be wider, and this is something we will talk, Brian and I, with the city engineer. You can see how wide the sidewalk is on the other side. That is accurate. That is where that person is on the sidewalk opposite the garage door. That is actually a parking space. In fact, this whole street has what I think is illegal parking. Next. We talked about some of the details, and I'll get to the Main Street facade in a moment, about the columns. It seems to have metal siding on the side, but the back of the column is brick. This will be thin brick. Thin brick comes in L shape, so it can look like real brick. It is real brick, but it can look like fully dimensioned brick. I question the metal siding on the columns. I think that's all to talk about here. Next. Although I want to talk about the cornice and the facade, I think we'll wait to the next one. Go to the next one, please. So this is the largest image of the facade, and there are many nice things about this. Punched windows, storefronts along the whole length. At the same time, there's some concerns. What I referred to as a nervous facade, the fact that the balconies go left, right, you might feel that's fine and that's okay. But also with the windows having a varied treatment, with this metal trim that's extended. It's proposed to be zinc. I don't know if that will actually happen, that it'll be zinc, but that is the proposal. I think, and also in the bedroom windows, the smaller windows that you see two at a time, that is a panel below or spandrel glass, I'm not sure which, and I questioned that. We talked about colors. I think color of mullions are critical. The cornice is a modern representation of a cornice. I actually think, given the modern windows, we can do a more three-dimensional cornice. In fact, I think it needs it. I don't think the cornice has to be continuous left to right. I think it could be 85, 90%, and there be breaks at the column lines, creating almost a townhouse feel, but we can talk about that. I think that's it, and to me, this is a big issue about the treatment. You can see that the architect has incorporated planters at the hardware storefronts, but we want to keep the sidewalk. The public sidewalk is 8 feet, and we have asked for a 2-foot easement. So those planters might have to be pushed in a little more based on the drawings. It bothers me that the trees do not continue. It is town land, town sidewalk, so I propose that they continue. Same with the brick ban. You will see that the architect and landscape architect have proposed granite paving where the stairs come down and where the ramp is. And, you know, there might be a combination there, or it might be all granite. We will deal with that. The other thing, and perhaps some of you know this, recess retail has a record of not succeeding as well as retail that comes to the face. The classic example, and it's a little further recessed than this, is across from City Hall in Boston, where there's what was viewed as a wonderful arcade, and the retail has struggled there since the beginning of that building being built. In a project I worked on, the architect did something similar, and the retail has never worked. A bank went out of business. So what we're proposing is that the signage, the ramp has to be there. It's a fairly elegant way of incorporating a ramp, fronting it with outdoor seating. It could be a coffee house or light restaurant, which means there needs to be venting through the building for the kitchen. So signage would be at the column line, the front column lines, not recessed on the wall above the storefront next to the ramp. Next, please. Next, please. So if we did have a form of a cornice, and I'm curious to hear the board's reaction to that, I would think that it would turn the corner somewhat, not the whole length, but I think it would be helpful. Next, please. So this is a closer view showing the house, and as you know, the back wing of the mercantile building, we're now proposing that it be cut as a roof at the top floor with dormers, and it's a reflection of the house. Now, one of the issues with both storefronts, and I've been told, if you can go back, thank you, Brian. I've been told, I'm going through this as quickly as I can. I'm told the board has raised this or discussed this, is the hardware stores typically have shelves against the glass. And I've done buildings in my project area in East Cambridge where the first 2 years they abide by the planning board's regulation that nothing should be on the glass. But in 2 years' time, all of a sudden there are shelves against the glass. The hardware store on an 8-foot sidewalk has displays on the sidewalk, which in concept is wonderful, but we're trying to make the sidewalk as generous as it can be. And there are garbage cans for sale out there in the front of the present one, as well as stacks of shovels. So I think that's something to talk about. The architect, Ted himself, said he would hope that the shelving would be laid out perpendicular to the glass, having interior circulation along the glass line. I totally agree. In my previous work in other cities and towns, we've actually put in the review that anything you can see through the glass is subject to regulations by the planning board. And all it is freeing up the glass and not allowing a lot of signage on the glass. Next, please. Don't change it, but one of the things you saw that the architect and the development team have added lateral awnings, which we encourage. They would be able to come in terrible weather, but in good weather could come out, and it adds some excitement. Keep in mind that the hardware store is the end of retail on Main Street from downtown. And so it is a good magnet at the end. Everybody needs a hardware store. So whether or not the historic building really looked like this, that will be researched, and maybe it was a different style, early Italianate, but maybe not. But the position of the house seems to make a lot of sense to me, and seems to work. It is one unit. It's not two units, it's one unit. Living room, dining room, kitchen, bathroom on the first floor, bedrooms above. Next, please. And again, this shows where we would chisel the top of the fourth floor. And you can see what looks like a huge chimney is obviously the stair and the elevator. And we've talked about how to make that. We're just beginning to talk about how to make that more attractive and make it fit in. I don't think it's going to stand out as much as we see it here. I know others didn't believe that. That's the view, and in this case, the fence itself should be subject to design review. There is an existing fence around the single-family house whose garage we see there, and they have sort of a traditional residential solid fence about as high as what the architect's drawn here, with lattice work above, and some of it is not in good shape, and I would imagine the developer would be replacing all of that. We would obviously work with that neighbor. Next, please. You know, I realize there's a concern about the new meeting the old, but I have to honestly say, based on these drawings, that the wing of the new housing meeting the existing wood frame is quite nice. And yes, it's on a little bit on the tight side, but we talked about how to get more distance on the Elmwood wing from the existing buildings, and that would result in something that I proposed that I know the board was not for, and that is adding a fifth floor, a partial fifth floor on Main Street. Next, please. So this is the basement. We had discussions, but none of it is relevant here. I asked about how is the hardware store going to get heavy loads up, and the hardware store would put in their own lift. Next, please. This is pretty amazing. I must admit, I was wondering how water storage would be handled, and their water storage will be between the basement and the first floor, and on the outside courtyard there will be a layer of dirt, which from memory I believe is like 2.5 feet. So those trees, next please, in the courtyard, which are not shown here, but in the courtyard where that is defined by the house structure, mercantile building, and Elmwood, would have suitable opportunity to grow very well. and I have worked with the landscape architect in the past, and he is very credible and talented, and it will be pulled off. Next, please. Oh, sorry, go back. I'm sorry. Even though I think it's beyond the scope of this design review, and Cheryl Wolf did also bring it up about the lobby being tight, and especially on Elmwood. The architect is looking into that. One of the amazing things about this project is all the mechanical and uses that have to be put in here. The mail room, which is immediately to the lower right, the entry to the garage, the two bays, one in, one out, to the left, then an electrical room, then a bicycle room. As I said, I'm impressed with this effort in trying to humanize that stretch. My goal would be to get some more windows or an indication of humanity between the lobby and that secondary lobby next to the bike room. The other thing I thought was clever is off the courtyard, to the right of the courtyard, is a unit that opens to the courtyard right there. And why I'm smiling is I was going to recommend that and never had the opportunity, and it occurred. So you can see the different sizes in the retail, and how important the windows are in the hardware store, and why we need to be careful there, and in the small shop, if you will. The idea is to have some outdoor seating between those lower right columns, about there, yes. The stairs are pretty large, but I think one of the advantages of that is that it'll become a sit-down place. If you're not eating something at the tables, it becomes a joy. I've been working on a project in Cambridge. It's an old church that was brought down to grade. It was raised, and the stairs have become a hangout for the students. Next, please. So there's not much here, except there is a variety in the size of units, which I imagine is desired. You can see the sort of Juliet balconies on Main Street. They come out approximately 2 feet. And then there's a corner one all the way up at the top that is sizable and sort of expresses the corner in a deep way. And I think we can go next one. Next one. And next one. And oh, well, it's hard to read. Well, but the roof is well thought out on Elmwood Avenue, and as it faces the courtyard, we'll see it in elevations. I thought we had it here. That's half the building. Well, these are the same elevations we looked at before. So why don't we go on to the next one? Let me see where we are. So this is Elmwood Avenue, and although it's small, thank you, Brian. You can see the intersection of the slanted roofs, which is metal, proposed initially until pricing comes in as copper. I'm a little dubious. I hope it can happen. But you also can see the extent of the garage doors, and somehow to humanize that, maybe extending the brick at the jamb columns, maybe sneaking in another window into the lobby. We'll see. We're going to look at that. The brick treatment at the Mercantile building at the cornice, I think, will end up being weak. especially if it's thin brick. And at least some of the length from right to left should be a true cornice of some version. I'm not dictating it. Might even be metal. Next, please. So here you can see a better elevation, and I must admit, the bedroom window treatment, maybe I'm too much of a traditionalist. I'm a mixture, by the way. I've done modern buildings, but it seems nervous to me, and I think the facades want to be more calm and confident. I also think the balconies, I think the top floor could be different than the middle two floors, make the top somehow different. I've recommended a few things, but we'll see. There are a lot of good things in this project. I think it's tinkering. I think it's looking at the details. I think it's getting rid of spandrel glass or panels below the window, at least in the top floor, if not all the top 3 floors. I don't think there's anything wrong with the windows having the same head height, but maybe a different sill height, depending on if it's a balcony or a bedroom window. I think more richness can come from that. Next, please. Next. So we've looked at this from a different point of view, but you know what we're talking about. On the lower left-hand corner of the mercantile building is an issue that will need great detail study. That's the water inlet for flooding. And we just need, when I say we, the architect, and we need to just do an elegant design there. I mean, this is done in other places of the world and can be elegant, and but it is an issue that needs to be looked at. That is the inlet for the water supply during flooding. Next, please. I think this is only partial, so we'll pass it. So 1 story of the Elmwood wing, at least on Vine, is really hidden behind the retaining wall, which helps the project fit in with surrounding buildings. Is it a different density than the single family and the wood frame buildings? Absolutely. But I think the interface is well handled. Next, please. So this is the treatment of the back of the Elmwood Street facade. Next, please. I know that the historic house is important, and given what we all know, this seems to be a very solid treatment. Next, please. But historic will look at that. Now, I know there was discussion about this, the back elevation of the house. And I would say the upper windows could indeed be double sash. The reason the first, and I question this too, the reason the first floor windows are different is there's a stair on the left first floor window that's going up. So, you know, maybe that window can be a little different. And the window on the right is the bathroom on the first floor. I'm sure we could talk more about it, but this is the the housing courtyard that looks into this. And obviously more work will be done here. Next, please. So this is interesting. This, I know it's hard to see. This shows the house, the facade we just talked about, the mercantile building. You can see the water in the pale blue, and there's the earth. It's even more earth than I said above. So there's parking, water, and earth. I don't think I've ever seen this before. It's a green roof in essence. Next, please. Similar drawing. Next, please. And these are all the numbers. That might be it, Brian.
It is, yes.
Yeah, yes, so those are my thoughts. I mean, I haven't written anything. I want to hear the board. The architect and developer might have comments. I tried to go through it as quickly as I could. In short, this is impressive in its planning. It's impressive in trying to make the back wing fit in as much as possible and still incorporate some of these support rooms of parking entry, electrical, bikes, which can have a rear window, and the lobby. I would say my biggest concern is material colors, quality of materials, and I would try to make the top floor somehow be part of the conclusion of the building so it doesn't look like an extruded sausage and we took a floor off, that it becomes a special top of the building. And I'm a little nervous about the metal treatment on the jambs of the windows, trying to give character. As you know, in the guidelines, we talked about augmenting masonry with other materials that articulated. And in mine, of course, there's granite at the base of the building, which has been proposed. And I think the planters are granite, but I'm not sure. I don't know. But, you know, windowsills, to me, should be precast to look like stone, or stone quality precast. And I mentioned there could be a sill, continuous sill at the top floor, and literally a greater termination to the top of the building facing Main Street. Thank you.
Members of the planning board, did you have any questions or comments in response?
I'll jump in. I really appreciate Dennis's comments. There's just so many that are so good. I think right now we're looking at the facade, or at least I am, unless I'm missing something. I really appreciate his questioning what's going on with metal jambs. The first floor, he mentioned the columns. I hadn't picked up on that, but the back side, they're not faced with brick all the way around. I do think we want the columns should be faced with brick. His concern about the parking garage on the left, that was a really important point, that anything to augment the pedestrian experience. Really glad that Dennis picked up on the fact that we've got parking being used right now where we need sidewalk, but especially the top floor of this building. I like the idea of extending sills, for example, to create maybe like a spring course or something, and then definitely want to something more to happen on the top floor, especially around the cornice, without the height growing. That's really important. I think once we see this building in context with other buildings, it's the tallest building on Main Street. So some other approach to that top story, I think, is in order, and especially focusing on that cornice. When you wrap around Vine Street, definitely the ideas of pulling down that corner as you move into the residential neighborhood, that's really important. I guess, anyway, I thought there were many good points there. Nothing there that I thought was anything to disagree with. Just, I think, thank you to Dennis. He's touching a lot, and I think in sympathy with what we're trying to do.
I would like to echo what Maureen said. One of the things that, or I have a couple of notes that I wanted to highlight. Dennis, I really liked your comment about maybe doing something with the third floor to maybe make it a little different, the third residential floor, to make it look a little different from the two below it. So I think that would really change things. I have a question about the privacy of the units in the back, which are along the courtyard, both in terms of the yeah, see if you can pull up a picture there. Anyone will do.
If I could add something about that, which I failed, it's a 2-story unit, so the bedrooms are upstairs.
Right, yeah, I'm actually thinking more about the first floor privacy, because that courtyard is kind of like a common area.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's the 2-bedroom unit in the new building, which opens onto it's behind this. Brian, can you pull up one of the overhead views, or it's towards the end? I think it shows the layout of the interior. Yeah, keep one of those guys. Yeah.
You mean the one that has the door onto the courtyard?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, so that one right there, front. I mean, that's a lot of open space onto the courtyard. There's essentially a walkway right in front of their bedroom, and then the backyard of the townhouse in the historic building also. So I'm just a little concerned about creating. You don't want people like essentially wandering around in your private space. So that's my concern there. I don't know how you deal with that, but that's one of my concerns. And then the other thing is, and this is kind of, Brian, I just sent you an email with an image. I was hoping maybe you could pop that up. And that is dealing with the corners of the buildings. And I'm wondering if there's a way, I know they're like when you go from Main Street to Elmwood or Main Street to Vine, the corners of the buildings are very sharp. And I'm wondering if there's a way of rounding them. And I just was in Lynn a few days ago, and I saw this beautiful old building, and it does the corners very differently, but the way of rounding the corners really seemed to reduce the impact of the height. And so I know Brian will get a chance to pop that up.
Sorry, I'm in my email and it is not in. I have not received it.
Oh, darn it! It's because, yeah, I'm sorry. My personal email gets rejected by the town because it's being sent from Germany. So let me try sending that to you again. I apologize.
You might be able to copy and paste it into the chat if you wanted to. Yeah.
That is. Why don't we move on to the next person?
Okay.
That requires too many devices. It's easier to go through a satellite and send it to Brian.
Okay.
But if anyone wants, I'll shut up until I can get this image.
Dennis, I had a clarifying question about the arcade in the front. I think you were saying that sometimes this isn't good for retail or for a pedestrian experience.
Yes.
Is that what I heard you say? And if so, what was your suggestion for how they could make that a more welcoming or a better space?
When we did the master plan, urban design plan for Main Street, I brought this up that all these buildings are going to have a ramp, and that has to be in the private way, which means the retail will be set back. I think to the architect's credit, he's made it a place, and that will help. The hardware store is a dedicated use that people will come to. How many hardware stores are there? So that's positive. So I think whatever use goes here, it can feed off, help have traffic. It will have additional traffic because of the hardware store. So I think good lighting, display lighting. Ted and the architect and developer and Brian and I talked about the fact that the signage will be up where the two brick columns are, between the two columns, that it needs to be lit, not internally, externally. I think there are things we can do. We just have to be aware that we're gonna have this problem in every new building on Main Street. And I don't think Ted can improve on this. The only thing, no, I don't think we can improve on this because we need steps going up and the ramp has to occur behind that, the steps plan. Yes, Diab, that is nice. We're looking at your building.
Yes, I had to figure out how to unmute myself. So it doesn't actually lean outwards towards the street. That's because I don't have a proper land camera for that. But yeah, it just the rounding. Obviously, this has these beautiful windows on the corners, but somehow the rounding of the edges makes it. And so I'm just wondering if we took all of the. I mean, it's a conflict in styles perhaps. But to take all of those sharp edges and round them so that it's just feels more human in my mind. Anyway,
well, we'll definitely look at that and we'll get back to you. Yes, it's an elegant detail. My first reaction is it might work on Vine, but I wouldn't do it on Elmwood because we want to express the retail continuing from downtown through Elmwood, but terminating at Vine, and in a way this sort of expresses that something is different at Vine.
Right.
I think the concept is the street wall, that we're trying to create a continuous street wall.
That's right, but this is sort of an end of the retail.
Right, this is.
And I like that. Now, on the other hand, is this more expensive? Curves? Yeah, but Diab's gonna get money from Germany to make it work.
I think, just before I forget, maybe Brian, can we go back to the building? I think, the project. One, yeah, this is as good as anything. The one, to me, it's small, but now we're at the point of discussing some of well, some are big, like cornice, but we are like the balconies. The word I might use is agitated, or you might use syncopated, but I think as you said, I think the balconies or something else, that's a real easy thing. But a similar, smaller point would be on the shed roofs on the building to the left that fronts on Elmwood. I just think, could you work with him, with you and Ted, work some more on those shed roofs? They look, the dormers rather, they feel heavy to me, and I don't think there has to be any change in interior, but just the way they terminate, they're just, I think there's some horizontal thing going on there. I don't know exactly what the concept is, but it just to me, it doesn't work real well.
We will definitely look at that.
There we are. It's the shed dormers themselves. They just kind of rise this big vertical thing rather than looking like a dormer.
Fair enough. We will look at that.
While we're looking at this elevation, I'm just going to jump in with a question, but so when you were talking about in the beginning of the presentation, the intention of having the mercantile building in the front and more of the residential in the back, and it's kind of a wild question, is why brick in the back with the metal, and why is it all brick and metal? Because especially when you point out like the columns were like half metal, half brick, the insets of the windows were metal, and it's actually quite a departure from the area and also of what's coming back up in Vine.
I'm sorry, I could be wrong on the windows being metal. I assume they were aluminum cased wood, but I don't know.
Inset? Oh, okay. I thought you mentioned that the inset on the front facade was metal surrounds.
That is metal. Yes, I'm sorry, Heather. Yes.
So you're mixing all these metals with brick, which is also an upkeep hot mess. But I just was wondering why stick with the brick on the back and the rear and all the way around in more of the residential areas and change the material?
Well, number one, it's more durable.
Yep.
Number two, I think you'd agree the mercantile building should be brick. And the building to the left in this view is brick. I didn't mention that the architect has proposed two different bricks, one on the mercantile building and a different color brick on the Elmwood building. So there, it is being expressed as two. I do think brick buildings feel, no joke I'm not trying to joke this time, solid and.
I was gonna say heavy. That's why I was wondering if changing the material on the back.
Well, you know, we haven't talked about colors with the development team, but a subtle light color on the window jambs and the mullions would lighten this up tremendously. I actually feel the same about Converse Place, but that was a different project. It's a combination of materials. You know, the option is concrete clapboard, and quite frankly, I think that's cheap looking. And I know
totally
it opens
agree.
up.
Yeah.
It opens up after 10 years. The joints open up if it's not done correctly. And I was actually happy that they said masonry initially.
I just want to make that clear. I think this is much, much preferable.
I just think we have to humanize it a little more. I think where they've gone from the beginning, they've made a great leaps, and I honestly think we could get there. Now, I should say the columns that I think Heather brought up, it turns out the back of the column is brick. It's just the sides of the entry columns are metal. And I think that's sort of a creative detail, but I'm afraid I don't want the brick to look like wallpaper. And thin brick it doesn't have to, but I think the front facade is designed to make it feel like wallpaper. The architect, Ted, doesn't agree with me, to be fair, but again, this is all, you know, early drawings, not further developed and detailed.
When you look at the columns too, the detailing they have doesn't go all the way up. It stops short so that the structural elements are not really fully embraced. So if as a pedestrian walking by those piers, it actually reads as like the whole building up. There's no definition at the top line where it transitions to the overhang.
Yeah, in fact, that's where I saw the cornice breaking, stopping. So there would be 5 cornice pieces. Each unit would have its own cornice, so it's not a continuous cornice. Yeah, you're
at
saying
the very
no
top of the building? I'm talking about at the columns. That
yeah,
the
no pile
like,
expression. Yeah, well, this is.
Yep. That's probably where the lights are going.
That's that usually happens when you have an old building that has more than one thickness of brick. It's, you know, there's usually as much as 3 thicknesses of brick because the wall is a structural wall above the first floor, and then you can play with the columns coming out more so. This is more typical of modern construction. I'm not saying you're wrong, I'm just saying it's a different expression.
Dennis, this is Cheryl. I have a question about, and I like all your comments about the spandrel and the humanizing of the commercial portion of the building. My question is, the Juliet balconies are pretty standard fare these days for urban apartments.
Yes.
But the carved away balcony or patio on the right. I think we've heard comments in past meeting. I think it was Jamie Duvall who commented on that. And I'm wondering if that's really appropriate or even desired in terms of people with their barbecues and, patio furniture landing out in that sort of corner of a brick building that has a face on our main street. I know the patios in the building, fully residential building that's just to the right,
Yes.
are recessed, and so they're kind of dark little caves, I don't think, and they're behind trees. It's a very different kind of treatment, and I'm wondering what your comments are about that as is it humanizing, or is it going to compromise the sort of commercial character of this facade?
Well, I think the rental agreement can say whatever it wants about the conditions on what you can put out there. But you're right, there will be chairs out there. But hopefully it doesn't become storage during the winter for the bicycles and barbecue. I think Diab's comment, now I don't see anybody, including the development team, but Diab's comment about a curved treatment there would lessen the impact of those balconies. That happens to be, if there's a luxury unit in this building, they're at that corner. I can't remember if it's 2 or 3 bedrooms, but it's large. And I'm guessing that's why they have that special balcony there.
Well, if the geometry of the building can't find a way to soften the corner, maybe it's just that there's a glass corner in that unit as opposed to a brick corner. But I think right now having the patio, I'll call it, out at the end there and that carved away, it doesn't, it's going to be hard to kind of come up with a good cornice treatment at that location. Again, it's going to be something that
Right.
flying brick, roof is going to be always perched at the top of something that's supposed to be much more solid and powerful, I think, as part of the Main Street.
I think that's a sound comment. I'm writing it down. My role, I design buildings too, but my role in urban design, I see, is trying to be a go-between between the board, the guidelines, the architect, the developer, and still being firm about what's needed, but we're not going to get everything. But we all want a good project. Everybody does. So what is that? And I think your comments are solid, and we have to talk about that. We, with the development team.
Mm-hmm.
Dennis, what do you think about recessed balconies so that people actually have more space if they want plants and stuff?
Yeah, I believe in the guidelines. Design standards. That's what we said. On the other hand, when you open one of the sliding doors, you'll have more distance, and it's only 2 feet, so I think that's what's going to be out there, are plants by the fixed sliding door. I would prefer plants, but when it's only 2 feet deep, you can't have a plant edge. I've done that on projects, and it's quite nice, but renters don't tend to maintain it unless they really have a green thumb. It's condo people who maintain it. But I agree. I mean, I love greenery on the building. I tried to encourage the developer to have a roof deck for the community.
Yeah, it doesn't seem like there's enough open space.
It's a tight site. I mean, I think they've done amazingly well. I mean, I grant you, I've had comments, but amazingly well for a really strange site. Dimensionally and angle wise.
I agree with everything you pretty much presented, Dennis. There wasn't really anything that I was opposed to or didn't see that had merit to it. As you mentioned, the nervous front facade, I've kind of mentioned that before with the balconies moving around and the punctured slit windows, whether you join them and make them just one big window and get rid of the bottom panel, or however you go, whatever you came up with some ideas when you were presenting. So all that along with the cornice line, as you mentioned, I agree with everything pretty much you went through with that. I'm going to accept the tower. I'm going to go back to this because everyone keeps saying the ladder, right? You don't want a ladder. There are other ways to design it where you don't need a ladder, where you open it up at the third floor and you create almost a shaft with a drain, and you have the stairs open to the elements on the next floor up. So then you're going to the roof that way versus
that doesn't meet code, ice, and it needs to be an enclosed stair.
You mean the stair itself has to?
I believe so, yeah.
Do it with a hatch as well and have the enclosed stair, and then the hatch opens up to it and have a full staircase built in.
That practice is not encouraged anymore, and I thought I mentioned the legal case I was a part of.
Oh, you mentioned a ladder. You didn't mention that the other ways to design it. So, all right. So you're gonna look into making that less like a box.
Make it feel like part of more than just brick, dead brick. It needs. We don't know what it is. I admit it, but we will pay attention to that, and it truly in the right location. It makes sense there.
Okay, and then with the historical house, I believe those stairs need a handrail.
Yes.
That lead up to and then also there's a edge there that also requires a handrail. It might not be based on how far out the grass landings are, how long those are. Mm-hmm. But I think you're missing handrails for accessibility there. Members of the board, are you ready to move on to our next agenda item, or do you still have few more comments to share with Dennis while he's here?
All said. Thanks to Dennis. I really think there were a lot of really good ideas, and I think I look forward to seeing what happens after the next after whatever Ted Talukian responds. So,
Madam Chair, my question, and maybe Brian already knows the answer. This is the second time we've presented this to the development team. We did yesterday in a pre-meeting to discuss what was possible, what wasn't. And it was a productive meeting. Do I prepare notes now, or do we just negotiate with the development team and then come back to you?
I believe that you go negotiate with the development team and come back.
Okay.
And we'll bring it back before when they go through and look at.
Okay. I think it shouldn't take a long time. This was well presented, but notes are in everybody's interest. So I would urge notes from what we just heard. Okay. They're also part of course, our recording secretary has.
Yeah, I was going to say, are you talking about outside of our meeting minutes that our recording secretary took?
Yeah, because those will be, Dennis will present them as he, with his intention, and might even clarify. So I think it's much better if it comes from Dennis.
And then I could talk about I could talk about progress after the notes are done, which usually is very helpful to see what's happened, what hasn't happened.
Yeah, use your notes as your starting point for action items.
Exactly.
And updates on those action items in either an Excel document or a Word document list.
Yes.
Can I ask one last question to Dennis?
Please.
I know that when we last spoke with you, there was a lot of discussion about the plinth that the little Vine Street house is sitting on. And now that you understand better how the earth and the water and the garage all are operating, there was some discussion about the greenery in front, the stairs, moving the house closer to the street. Was one thing I think you brought up from a Marblehead kind of, urban thinking. Was there anything that you saw or discussed with the development team that illuminated whether or not you had any options at addressing the siding of the house in terms of the requirements below and the street?
Well, that's a good question. I'll tell you what I was thinking. I did mention moving the house forward, thinking it would be more of a presence on the street and would allow the back of the house, the historic house, a little more privacy, not bordering the garden, the treed garden. But then I started focusing on the location of the ramp. The ramp is sort of hidden in this view. It's right next to the driveway of the house next to it. And then you could tell there's a ramp up to the end. Thank you, Brian. And a ramp up to the entry. And I was trying to figure out if there's a way to get the ramp where that pedestrian is on the sidewalk between the house, and therefore the ramp entry could be like a little patio for them, for the house, somehow in the front, so they had a presence on the street, and that you didn't have anybody going to the courtyard walking in front of them. It's much like what was brought up about the unit right next to the courtyard. But looking at it and understanding the drawings, I'm not sure we can get the ramp in, the height, given how far down the sidewalk is where that pedestrian is drawn. So I'm not sure we can change it. When I said moving the house forward, I didn't know the plan inside the house.
Mm-hmm.
And it's the stair and the bathroom and the kitchen. And I was trying to get a little private backyard for them. But it again, this site is so tight, and almost anything they've done, I really do give them credit.
So the ramp access then, it needs the neighbor's driveway in order.
No, it's on the developer's property. It looks like it does, but it's hidden by that retaining wall in the foreground.
I gotcha. Okay.
If you look at the plan, you'll see it better.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the question is, how many people will use this ramp to go into the building? I'm not sure many people will, but time will tell.
You still need to keep it.
Sorry?
Dennis, you still need it. You just need to keep it, though. You need to keep the ramp, right?
Oh, yeah. No, the ramp would stay there. I was just trying to make a more direct one to the courtyard that avoided the front door of the house, so they could have a table and chairs out there.
Yeah, you might suggest that the developer place the railings that are necessary there, because it's going to have an impact on this view quite a bit, actually.
So we're running behind on time, but I didn't want to cut Dennis off because I want to make sure that he has enough, so everyone keep moving forward on this project. in their discussions. At this point, we need to continue to a time certain. If we would like to do that, based on our meeting, we are scheduled, our next meeting is January 12th, but I was looking maybe to continue it to January 26th. And hopefully that will give the development team time to go through and maybe come back on the 26th with some updates.
I think that's great.
When is the 90-day review period over?
So I'll speak to that. If legal counsel is still on, I believe that we are still under the executive order, meaning that the 90-day period to render a decision is not happening or not valid at the moment. That is how I read the law. If Mina, if you're still on, if you want to speak to that, please.
All right, I think you're correct that we are certainly still under the emergency order, and the permit extension pieces under the order and under the legislation still apply. So I think that's right.
Thanks for that, Mina. So yeah, so basically we don't need permission to extend the time, and we do not have to render a decision by any time certain while the emergency order is still in effect.
That's interesting. Cities are not doing that. Maybe towns have the right to do it, but not cities. Of course, I could be given bad information, which I'll investigate.
No comment.
So does that work for Mr. Talukian? Would that work for January 26th? Is that a good time frame for you, or would you like us to push it further out?
This is Ted Talukian. This does work for me. I would also ask that of the development team.
Yep. Ian, are you present?
I am, Madam Chair. To the extent, I think our deadline, if I'm not mistaken, and perhaps council and the planner can address the fact that we have an election coming up in March. So I'm not sure that we have all the time in the world. So the earlier the better, please. Thank you.
That is a good point the applicant brings up, meaning that if this is still going during the election and there's change in the board makeup where maybe it's possible obviously that there are 2 new members on the board, and therefore we wouldn't be able to you need 4 votes for a special permit, and therefore we might not have 4 members that were present at all but 1 meeting. So that you do bring up a good point.
I'm going to jump into members of the planning board in terms of this project. There is going to have to be a time where we dedicate pretty much an entire meeting and go into our discussions, and I would like to also make sure that we give ample time to residents to ask questions of us and also of the applicant. So I believe that we should actually schedule a standalone meeting. However, I would like to do that let's get to January 26th, see what comes, and then decide on a date for that standalone thereafter. Does that sound good to the members of the board?
I'm certainly fine with it. The question, of course, Ted Talukian has work to do, and that's really, no matter what Mr. Gillespie says, Ted Talukian's going to be the most critical person in this, in terms of timeline.
Yeah, I felt the 12th might be too tight for him, but.
I agree with your idea, Heather, but I would, if the 12th is possible, and then we hold this longer meeting on the 27th, February's always busy because we have town meeting coming up. And we have to get all of our motions in, right? Or am I off by a month?
No, you're correct.
So I know you're right, Maureen. This is really up to Mr. Talukian as to whether if he could make the 12th. That's a question to him.
Yes, we'll be available whatever schedule's needed. I think it would be best that, we just review schedules with our client and get back to you, but I want to make sure that we're available and we will be ready when needed upon.
Well, yeah,
Well, at this time, why don't we continue to the 12th at a time certain, and if needed, we will just move it and then continue it again to the 26th.
that works for me. I think that's the wise way to do it.
Brian, based on what you have, what we have outlined for our schedule for the 12th, are you comfortable with doing that right now? Or is our 12th just packed?
Well, it's certainly not full, but if this is planning on being more of a check-in meeting and not if the idea is to do a longer meeting later, I think we can, do 8:30 to 9. If you want to, we'll do a 30-minute, or if there's no point in that, we can make it longer, but I'm not really 100% sure of how much you're trying to get done in that meeting.
Well, for right now, we just need to set the time, so we can say 8 o'clock.
That's fine. That can
Leave
work.
it there. We don't have to state how long we're going to do, and then 48 hours we can determine how long we need and you can touch base with Mr. Talukian and Dennis along with the other consultants and figure out what we have available to review on the 12th and go from there.
All right, 8 o'clock makes sense then.
Okay. All right. Is there a motion?
Well, hang on. We do have Mr. Brendan Lyons, I believe, is coming in, and I thought, have you already set it up, Ryan, for 7:30? Brian?
Sorry, couldn't hit the mute fast enough. So no time certain. I'd set to hold a night, and it'll be a 30-minute agenda item, but a time has not been established.
Well, we always open with some updates, so I would say
Let's go to move it later.
Yeah, but we need chunks of time. 8:30.
So let's just move it. Let's move it to the 12th at 8:30.
Very good.
Does someone make a motion to that?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All right. Please roll call vote.
Hannon, aye.
Curious, aye.
Aye, sir. Aye.
Wolf eye.
Von Mering, aye. Motion passes 5-0. The hearing is continued to January 12th at 8:30 p.m. Thank you, everyone who joined us for this, and we will see you again, if not sooner, on the 12th of January, if you're only here for this part. We are going to move on to the ZBA permits, number 3921, 3 Edgewater Place. This is for a recommendation. We're going to be discussing a recommendation to the ZBA for site plan review under section 9.5.1 of the Winchester zoning bylaws. Brian, do you want to go through your recommendations?
Sure. One thing I just wanted to note, this was sent to the board, the planning board, and in your packet, but was not reflected in my memo, which was the votes from the historical commission related to 3 Edgewater Place. The motion was that the historical commission found the plan submitted to have no adverse effect on a historical or cultural resource, and they recommended favorable action with no conditions, with 6 in favor and 1 abstain. So I just wanted to make that clear before, because my memo said that I hadn't received the historical commission's memo, but that's there. And if you'll give me a minute, I'll bring up my memo. All right, so here. So petitioner seeking site plan review to create a house that will be greater than 5,000 square feet. It's in the RDB. It's a large lot at 41,000 square feet. So the proposal entails the destruction of an existing 1958 house and garage to construct a new house with an attached garage at the same location. Oh, sorry, that's right. I forgot to mention that Heather Hannon is recusing herself and will be either leaving the room at the moment or not participating. So thank you, Heather, for that. Sorry, we didn't mention that earlier. So as viewed from the street, the massing of this project seems to be very similar to the existing house that is from the street. Sun setbacks are improving while the right setback is proposed to be closer. I thought that the proposed scale, character, and materials of the house are in balance with the neighborhood. Only 3 mature trees are proposed for removal. The stormwater analysis has been reviewed by the engineer, and it appears that they have made those changes. If there's any more related to that, the town engineer, I believe, is here. I recommended favorable action with regards to this petition. A lot of the reason was simply its view from the street and the location of the garage and the house look similar from the street. That is all I had at the moment, and it's back to you, Heather.
I know I saw Beth Rudolph, town engineer, on this call. Beth, did you have any comments or questions? I know Brian mentioned you didn't have any concerns, but just double checking.
No, we have reviewed this submittal as part of the NOI that was proposed and didn't have any issues, or we had a minor issue that they addressed as part of the submittal, so we're all set. Thank you.
Thank you. Also, Brian, we did receive communication from residents regarding this, and they asked that we specifically read in. Do you want to do that?
Yeah, I'm getting that up right now.
Okay.
Okay. The letter, we received this letter yesterday to be read into the record. We are, so this is, we'll start at the end here. This is Mr. Kevin and Stephanie Sarney. We are writing as abutters to 3 Edgewater Road. While we generally respect people's property rights within zoning and other land use rules, we are opposed to the proposed petition to raise the existing home and build a new 9,700 square foot residence at the location for the following reasons. Design is not consistent with the immediate neighborhood of Cape and Ranch style houses as viewed from the public way. The average square foot home on Edgewater is around 3,900 square feet. The 4 houses on Edgewater range from 2,300 to 4,800, and the proposed house is 9,700. The area of Edgewater, Everett, and the surrounding streets are mostly older homes from early 1900s, and Edgewater is unique in its design of lower homes, one of which is a Royal Barry Wills. The size is not consistent with the greater neighborhood, as the average size on Everett Ave is 5,200 square feet, and the proposed house is 185% bigger than the average house. The proposed house will disrupt current views and cause shadows on the neighborhood of Edgewater. Currently, when walking or driving by the public view area on Everett Ave, you can see Boston off in the distance. The majority of houses on Edgewater are 1 story with a roof, while the proposed house is 2 stories plus a roof. The back of the proposed house is viewable from the public way of Robertson Court. These homes are further away on the Mystic Lake outside of the 300-foot abutter notification. Robertson Court looks directly into the backyard of the proposed house at 3 Edgewater, and from the rear, 3 Edgewater looks like a 3-story building. The dormer on one of the garage roofs looks greater than 50% of the total roof size, and if so, this should require a special permit. Construction of the house will worsen existing parking challenges. Edgewater is a very narrow street with existing parking issues associated with a local club during the summer months. Some sort of traffic management program should be proposed to limit parking of trucks, etc., in the circle to minimize neighbor disruption. We hope the planning board is consistent with its recent recommendations on 53 Lawson and 138 Forest Street for site plan reviews. The board should also be mindful of a similar proposed building on a lot at 16 Niles Lane, which also has a historical structure on the lake in this neighborhood. Sincerely, Kevin and Stephanie Sarney.
Members of the board?
Because I am liaison, did hear the presentations at the at the Historical Commission, And at design review, the historical commission did have a survey done of the house, a survey form. And there certainly is an argument to be made that it's a historic house and has some it fits from a mid-century modern context. And then over the weekend, I walked over to Edgewater Place and walked in and looked at the three houses. One of the members of the design review committee, the one who abstained, commented, I think rather, convincingly about how the context of that neighborhood is coherent, and it's as the Sarney letter suggests, the scale, everything, all works beautifully. Those three houses have a similar height and spread. They go together, and I just don't think that the new house fits context at all. There is a coherence right now to that little cul-de-sac, and I really appreciate the points. This is the first time I've seen this letter from the Sarneys, but I really appreciate all the points that they make. So it's site plan review. The scale of this is extremely large, which is what brings it into site plan review. But the nature of it, I have my zoning bylaw here. I'm not pulling it up, but the impact on the historic resource is also relevant. Yeah, so this is what you see right now. And thanks to Brian, it just totally changes the cul-de-sac. So in any case, it's here for the size of the proposal, and it just doesn't fit any longer. So I would recommend withholding site plan review, withholding the approval on site plan review.
Other members of the board?
Yeah, so I agree with everything Maureen said. I also want to note that we seem to often overlook the fact that public waters are actually public right-of-ways, and so that what people see from the actual water is part of our review. And the letter that the abutters wrote talked about the impact on the neighboring property, but certainly when you look at the rear of the property from the water, and I know we've had this discussion about other properties on Winter Pond, I believe. When you look at the proposed development from the water, it certainly looks like a 3-story building. It does not have that same compact view that the existing structure has. And so I would think that I can't tell as much from the drawings as I'd like how, whether they've stepped it back. I don't think so. I think it's just one big facade. No. Yeah. So I think it fails on that end. I didn't, the dormer issue is one that I'd have to go back to our bylaws to see exactly what, I believe it's on a separate plane, but I'm not sure. Someone who has the bylaws in their mind better might know that. I think it would be a great loss. It's a very appropriate size for the lot and for the neighborhood. I think that the design doesn't work within the context of the neighborhood. It's totally different. So I am not in favor of this project. Thank you.
Ryan, would you be able to bring up the project drawings?
Well, and also, definitely yes to your request, Cheryl, but also we want the 9.5.7 for the decision, because we'll then want to test what we're seeing against minimize unreasonable departure from the character, materials, and scale of buildings in the vicinity. I mean, that's pretty straightforward. As viewed from public ways and places, and Dia brings up the point that both sides would be considered public ways and places. And number 2, minimize any adverse effect on any historic resource. That's certainly relevant. And again, I'll stop in a sec, Cheryl, so you can speak. there we are. So these two are the super important here. I can't even address some of the others, but I will say that with the historic resource, we should be in the practice, and we're not getting them, but we should be seeing the B forms that are prepared for these reviews. There's a very, I think, a very useful and informative review that was done by the independent consultant for the Historical Commission, and this should inform everyone, including the ZBA, when they get to this point. I'm done, Cheryl, thanks. But Brian, can you make sure that B form goes to the ZBA?
Sure thing.
Yeah, I based on your comments, don't disagree that this is not part of the character of that little cul-de-sac. But is that from the lakeside? I do know that house from the lakeside, and it's built in, and the terrain sort of falls down towards the lake. This is, character all along the edge of the lake, the Upper Mystic. So this side of the building, if you were to go along the lake, would not be out of character, honestly. So I think really understanding that access to views that you brought up in that document that, is within the zoning, would be a good thing to have studied by the design team that's put this project forward, in terms of, really looking at how it blocks other people living in that area, not on the lakeside, but on the land side, how it does harm to that. As far as this side of the house, honestly, the current house does not really address the lake in any kind of beautiful or interesting way. So this is probably going to be an improvement in terms of people accessing and spending time by the water. Those are my only comments.
Maureen, I know you were at the meeting for the historical and you can't speak to them, but I still can't understand how they did not find this building historical. And I don't, because they're like three on that cul-de-sac. They all go together and they all have a story, and I just don't understand how they did not find it historical.
I believe, am I unmuted? Yeah. I believe it was it was a 4-2 vote. So there were 2 people who accepted the recommendation of the evaluation, let's call it, or assessment of the outside consultant. So there were 2. I can't speak for everybody. Obviously, I was listening. I think, honestly, I'll say there's a lot more sympathy for buildings of an earlier period than there are for mid-century modern, as the commissioners discussed it. And so there are those who appreciate that mid-century is a historic period, and the buildings have their own, they're advocates now for them. And I think others just kind of looked at it and said, well, I remember that period when I was growing up. So that would be my answer, but I can't speak for them. It was definitely a split vote.
Because I think what the shame is because they are saying that it is not historical and can be demolished. It doesn't take into account that the other 2 buildings I feel are also historical, and it's kind of just throwing them out and not taking into response. So I guess I agree with your perspective that from the street view on the cul-de-sac, that it just is not, it doesn't fit in with that cul-de-sac neighborhood. So
no, they harmonize.
I think you made all good points, and
spent quite a bit of time, my husband and I did, because we went together on the weekend and just were looking at the three together and how they, different aspects of them all sort of talk to each other, and roof shapes, pitch of gables. There's some bows on some of them. Oh man, the way the siding is applied, just all sorts of things. But mainly it's the height and the kind of width, breadth of those houses that makes them all go together.
Brian, can you show the site plan again? If you don't mind.
How's that scale?
Yeah, that's great. So have there been any questions about the 100-year floodplain? I know that's probably not anything that we're involved with, but.
Yeah, they're going through the NOI, or have gone through and are finishing up the NOI process. So they've been in front of Conservation Commission for quite some time related to this.
Okay.
The floodplain shown on the map, there's no building in the floodplain area proposed.
Okay. Oh, thank you. I was looking at the buffer.
Did anyone want to make any recommendations?
I'll recommend that we that the ZBA withhold approval under site plan review.
I would second that, but I would like to take a look at the dormer on the garage, and if we could, so I'll second that motion, and then I'll shut up, and Heather, you can ask for further comment, discussion.
Further discussion?
Okay, now can we please, Brian, could you bring up our the bylaws regarding the dormer, so I get idea of what the plane was that we need to worry about?
It's certainly, it's on either the front or the back. It's on any one plane that it can't be 50% or more on on that third, or considering the second and a half stories. So it only counts, it would count in this case because it's that half story above the second floor, and it's 50% along any plane. So in this case, it would be the front or the back. So it would, if it was 50% on the front, that would be a special permit. If it was 50% on the back alone, that would be a special permit.
Okay, so if you could please pull up, I'm trying to get the page which shows the dormer. I think it is, I had it a second ago, but now I've lost it. I keep losing it. That's close. Oh, it's page A2.1. Which is, yes, and if you shift that to the right, correct, I mean. So my question is, so this structure has lots of different planes. So we're pointing out that we're looking at the dormer on the left on that. Now, is that one, do we count that as a single contiguous plane across the entire structure, or just for the garage?
Because it's only on the second story and not on the third, it doesn't count towards the 50% requirement.
Agree with that, Heather.
Okay, that is an important.
This is truly not a floor here. There's more than,
Majority of the lower level is underground, so it doesn't count as a story.
Okay, so we know that, yeah, okay. So this doesn't apply there.
Yep.
And
okay.
I think that nips it right there, I think.
Yep, thank you much.
So we have a motion,
And a second, yes.
withhold site plan review and a second. Any more discussion? Roll call vote.
Do we want to list what we're gonna put down? It would make my job easier.
Members of the
So
board?
I'll just go back to the zoning.
Yeah, let's go back to the zoning.
Oh, it's always a good idea, right?
Maureen, I
we
think the
must-
list you gave in the beginning was, if you have your notes from that, of what you provided in the beginning, I think that's pretty much sums it all up.
Right, well, it's, I know 1 and 2 under, this is Brian speaks this language so beautifully, but under, 9.5.7.
So
I think
it's
that pretty much sums it up. Minimize unreasonable departure from the character, materials, and scale. All of it. The character, scale. I can't speak so much for materials, but certainly character and scale are just simply not consistent. And anyway, it's certainly an adverse effect on the historic resources, which are the mid-century buildings.
Okay, so, I'll be writing this up with Brian, so, I've got, adverse effect on historical resource. I'll put the numbers on this section numbers. Adverse effect on historical resource, height and breadth of houses in cul-de-sac, are harmonious, and this would break that. Cheryl, you pointed out it would block views of the lake from the street. And we have scale and
Well, there's character as a word in the zoning.
yes, I will, yeah, character, I will be using that language from the zoning. I just want to make sure I get everyone's concerns down.
Sorry to interrupt. Excuse me. I'm sorry to interrupt. That my name's Tobin Schulman. I'm the architect.
Yeah, Heather, can you bring us?
Moderate.
So usually we don't, unless we have questions, bring in the applicants, because you'll be able to then, you can go through the ZBA when you present with them.
Okay.
If
I just wanted to respond to some of the comments, but if this is not the place for that, that's fine. We can review with the ZBA.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, so I have those 5 points, and then I will write that up. Thank you.
I just wanted to make one note that it might be somewhat confusing for the ZBA if the historical commission is saying that there's no adverse effect on a historic resource and we are saying there is. They might want some clarification on that, just trying to think ahead here.
Well, it's a split vote, Brian, and they had the assessment, which, I'm sorry we can't read it, but I think people in this meeting do appreciate it, that if you attach the assessment from Claire Dempsey and understand it was a split vote, that I think they'll take it for what it is.
I think I can include language saying that the cul-de-sac represents a coherent, intact expression of mid-century modern architecture.
That's correct. I agree. Thank you.
And that is why we believe that this is of historic import.
Thanks. I just thought some clarification would be good. Great.
Yes, excellent point. Thank you.
All right, roll call vote.
Yeah, hello.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was waiting for Heather Hannon. Aye.
Meister, aye.
Wolf, aye.
Mering, aye. Hannon abstains. 4-0-1. Number 3922, Lot A, Webster Lot, 6A and 6B.
Okay. So petitioner seeking site plan review to build a duplex where the total floor area will be greater than 3,600 square feet. It's also seeking special permit to construct dormers that will be greater than 50% of the width of the roof plane. Property is located in the RG zoning district and contains 12,756 square feet. The Historical Commission had met on the demolition permit on this last year and found the house to be historically significant, but did not impose the 12-month delay because the proposal was to relocate the house at 8 Webster Street. So we're talking, it used to be the same property. It was 6 to 8 Webster Street. So this was the house that was located at 8 Webster Street. And it was to move the house over in order to create this new lot. At the time of this, there was talk that the house had been demolished instead of being relocated, but the pictures were taken and the house is still there. So 8 Webster is still there, and it's actually on the market for, it's on the market right now. The Historical Commission, there was nothing to review at this time related to this. The proposal entails the construction of a new home that will be 6,000 square feet with a central garage design and 3rd floor dormers on the rear of the house that are nearly 80% of the length of the roof plane. There's a mix of small and large single and duplex houses on this street on Webster, and some are actually quite large in the vicinity of the proposed house. However, the structure has massing that is not fully integrated, coherent, and unifying specifically due to the protruding garage. Shifting the house closer to the street to be more in line with other houses is recommended, as well as trying to minimize the amount of impervious surface on the front of that lot to square up the garage so as not to protrude as much. I think there's room to work with the front setback and the location and scale of this garage. The percentage of the dormer along the roof line in the back is clearly too large. The proposed dormers in the rear should be minimized further, probably something closer to 16 feet per dormer or smaller. That was all I had for this lot.
So, Brian, I have a couple of odd questions. So this was all part of a single lot and it was subdivided? And I
so this was a, yeah, so this was a duplex, or still is the location of a duplex. I can actually get there, show where it was.
Because when I go on Mass GIS, I am having a real problem understanding what I'm seeing.
Yeah, me too.
Because
okay.
It looks like they are subdividing.
So this is 8 Webster. 8 Webster was on a lot This is another lot that was 6 Webster. However, it was under common ownership and a house has not ever been built here as far as we know. In order to get a duplex lot here of 11,000 square feet, this house at 8 Webster went through a demolition permit, not to be demolished, but just to be moved to the right. So this house was picked up and moved to the right, I believe 20-something feet. Once that, yes, and it is for sale right now. It's on the market.
Actually, it's under agreement.
Okay, even further. There we go. It's under agreement. It's a gorgeous looking house. This picture does not do it justice. So now 6 Webster, now they're going through 6 Webster in order to try to put a duplex with the design that we're currently trying to review, that I would imagine others have some concerns related to the design.
Okay, so that explains. So if you go to Mass GIS, there's a property line which runs directly through this house, and that's what confused me. So they have moved the house so that's actually on the 8 Webster lot, and what Mass GIS is actually calling 0 Webster Street is really 6 Webster. Okay, thank you. I'm really happy to hear they didn't just demolish that house.
This house has a pair of garage doors right in the front and center. It's totally out of character with the neighborhood. I'm shuffling paper here and struggling, but I know Again, as liaison, I sat in and heard the discussions both from historical and design review, and in different ways they were referring to our definition of a duplex, and in different ways they made their motions and votes, but in both cases they were did not want this to go forward as designed. The driveway front and center, the garage doors, and so the main discussion was how if there's going to be for the parking, it just has to go to the side and to the rear. It just should. It's tight. It's very tight for a duplex. But if that's what's going to happen, it needs front doors on the street to be consistent in character with the neighborhood. And this one's a special permit, as I recall, correct? Site plan review and special permit.
So
yeah.
this,
It's
just
both.
so yes, but it's special permit just for the dormers. So it's site plan review for the size of the house, and the only relief they're looking for is just the dormers.
Well, we've still got our definition, so I guess that has to kick in. And what's a duplex, and how is this complying with duplex?
Yeah.
Couldn't agree. Oh, sorry. I was gonna say I couldn't agree more. And that's why I said this. I'm gonna bring up the definition, and then we can continue the conversation.
Maureen, were you saying that the other groups talked about putting the garages on the sides?
No, just getting that part. Well, what they were talking about, the main issue is getting this driveway out from the front and center, and the garage doors out from the front and center. After that, then, as you can imagine, boards tend to try to figure out what the solution is. Of course, that's not really our obligation, but they were saying if there's got to be a driveway somewhere, and it's the most obvious thing is for it to swing around to the back of the house.
Yeah.
The examples of structures that do not have fully integrated, if you look at the bottom left, that has the garage dead center in the middle. And also the one on the right, they just changed the roof line to try to. You would never design a single family unified massing with the garage dead center dividing the house in half.
I agree,
So,
totally.
I mean, so there's a couple things. They can either move the garage doors to the side, they can move it to the back, they can also make them detached garages right in the back.
Exactly, good.
And take up the square footage in more house versus, but it's just it doesn't work. And it's also, I was looking at the sizes of the houses along Webster, and it's big. It's really, really big compared to the other houses.
Yeah, it's wide.
Yeah.
I will say also, it's not typically something that we comment on, but I will point out to this board, those look like stock plans that were submitted to us. They had nothing to do with the site. They were from a stock plan from someplace, I don't remember, Wisconsin or somewhere.
Yep, Wisconsin.
This is a really tough site, given that they're trying to wedge in a duplex and the parking that you typically expect. So they're going to need an architect.
I don't like the dormer. They're really getting 3 stories out of it, and the whole point is just to try to circumvent the 2.5 story law.
Right, and that's the point of the bylaw.
It doesn't, they're not, the backside makes it even more non-unified, because it just reads as 2 separate units glued together again.
Yeah.
With that little 5 foot in between it.
Yeah, could you get to the rear elevation, Brian? Wherever it is. Yeah, that is just. Yeah.
Well, it's not as bad as the front.
The front's terrible.
Huh. Faint praise indeed.
All right, it's getting late. Can we get a motion?
I move we recommend unfavorable action on, what are we looking at? 6A and 6B Webster Street for the following reasons.
Well, hang on, Deb. Just to clarify, since you're on a roll there, with site plan review, what we recommend is that they withhold approval. And then we will
okay.
recommend unfavorable or a denial under, special permit.
Then I
Yeah,
recommend we recommend they withhold favorable approval, withhold approval.
That's all.
Withhold approval, for the following reasons. It does not read as a fully integrated, coherent, unified massing.
Under definitions
Right,
of a duplex.
under a duplex. The garage doors are too prominent and not in character with the neighborhood.
Well, no, it's more than that. They need to be moved that we don't want garage doors across the front that way.
Okay, how about, how shall we put this? Okay,
Well, given the scale of this one, I mean, there are places where you could have garage doors behind the main facade, but that won't happen here. These garage doors have to go to the side or rear,
okay, that's what Brian just said.
which is brilliant.
Okay?
I think the garage doors in the front encourage the parking in the front yard. And I
Yeah.
think that's really, unfortunate to the street.
Well, also under 9.5.7 decision for site plan review, it does include number 5, maximize pedestrian and vehicular safety. So sticking all that parking in the front certainly doesn't help.
I like those numbers, Maureen.
I don't have them in my head. Brian can do it in his head.
Okay.
9.5.7, it'll be subsection 1, and it will be, it'll be, just as you got it, subsection, where did that go, 5?
But I well, we allow 20-foot wide parking spots, which is, I mean, there's we all dislike this, but I don't think it's excluded by the zoning.
Oh, that's too bad.
Well, it says maximize pedestrian and vehicular safety. This one's just it's too much.
Okay.
It's
I
fine.
will try to write something like that. Brian, you'll have to send me these notes when you're done with them. Then I have going on, its massing is too large for, relative to the other homes on the street. And the dormers in the rear read as a third story, and I think that's about it, right?
Is there a way to say that we want to see duplexes, but not like this, so that people don't think that we're so strict about them that it's density we don't want when we do?
You can, sure, of course.
Yeah, I mean, we could say that, well, it is zoned for duplex. We are in favor of duplexes if they follow the rules.
Yeah.
We want to encourage that this is an appropriate place for a duplex if it was.
Yeah.
Thank you. This is an appropriate place for a duplex, as defined in our zoning.
Yeah, at the zoning law.
Okay.
One quick note, that Maureen was right that we would withhold site plan review, but there actually would need to be, unless you make this one vote, there needs to be 2 votes because there's also special permit relief being sought. So you would be.
And Brian, I'm
rec-
struggling with the special permit because it's under 4.2.5, but it's also 9.4.2. So 9.4.2 is special permit criteria. So that's not just the dormer.
No, 9.4.2 is the section that is used to administer all special permits. And 4.2 is 5, I believe, is this section related specifically to the dormers. So it's saying that it needs dormers, that dormers over 50% need special permit review, and then it points to 9.4.2 to say how that special permit is reviewed.
Right, so,
It triggers a special permit criteria.
yeah, so we can, I think if, Brian, if you go back to the motion,
It should be up there. You're not seeing the Word doc right now?
no, I'm seeing dwelling duplex, the
Oh,
pictures.
good. Wonderful. Okay, here you go.
Yay. So if we take out number 5, and we'll move that into another motion for the special, because that's the special permit. So just hold on to that language. And I will modify my motion, which has not yet been seconded, so I guess it's not complete. And so the motion is just for those 4 points there.
A second then would be needed. Anybody?
Did we lose everyone?
Did we lose everyone?
Oh, are you ready to vote?
Someone needs this. Well, so
I'm
Dia.
shuffling through my zoning bylaw.
There needs to be a second.
There needs to be a second. Yes. Who was that?
I'm sorry, you're breaking up. We can't tell who that was.
Heather.
Heather, if that was you, can you write something in the chat? You're unintelligible at the moment.
Well, can you hear me now?
Better.
You're still going in and out a little bit, Heather.
Why don't we ask for the second again, or?
Oh, it's
Yep.
Maureen. I seconded.
Oh, okay, great.
Discussion? Roll call vote? That's a yes by Hannon.
That was the creepiest. That was rather creepy.
Ghost of Heather.
It was
Meister,
not
aye.
Heather's fault. Let her be.
Meister, aye. Keep us moving. It's getting late. You've got me, Heather. Heather Von Meering. Keep us moving.
Yep.
Did we get
Yeah, Heather
Cheryl?
Hannon, you have Meister. We're doing roll call vote. Cheryl, are you there?
I am. Wolf eye. You guys hear me?
Yep.
Okay.
Von Mering, aye. I'm getting an echo. Okay, so that is a 5-0 vote. I heard all 5 yays.
Yes, you're good.
Moving on to the special permit vote.
I move that language. We vote the dormers in the rear must be minimized as they read as a 3rd story.
Second.
All those in favor, roll call vote. And as a yes by Heather Hannon. Next.
Jarius, aye.
Meister, aye.
Wolf eye.
Von Mering, aye. Motion passes 5-0.
One comment though, Heather. I think it might be helpful just for the to send some message. This needs to be a site a design that's site specific. I don't believe what we got was. I believe what we got was pulled out of some catalog. But I won't say, you know.
That would be for Diab writes them up. So
Say again?
That's for Dieppe to include in his overall.
Right, it needs a site-specific design.
Brian, do you know when the ZBA will be meeting on this?
I believe they meet Thursday.
Huh. No rest for the wicked. Okay.
It's actually a very good point you just made, Maureen, because I think that's where most people get really hung up through the zoning process in town, is they either use non-specific or they use let's throw everything in the kitchen sink in it, and then it gets too big, too out of control. And if you really focus on the site and its surroundings, usually you get much further with using the zoning.
Right.
Okay. So just deep
Deep
thought for late evening. So we had.
Can I interrupt?
Go ahead.
I'm sorry. There wasn't a second on that last vote.
Oh, I did.
You did. Okay.
Yep.
Oh yeah.
That's Nancy. Hi, Nancy.
Thank you.
For a second, I wondered who that was.
Thank you, Nancy, for interrupting. You can interrupt anytime. So moving onward. So we have 2 items left. We have the Master Plan Implementation Committee organization, and we have Washington or Swanton Design Consultants. It is 10:20. What would you like to do, my board?
When is our next meeting?
It is the 12th of January.
I don't think we can hold off on the Washington Swanton design.
Right, I agree.
All right, so let's move to that topic. Brian, do you want to give a general quick 2-minute overview of the information you gathered this week and what the status is of Washington Swanton Street for all those who are listening?
Sure. So I'm not sure who was involved in the call, but I know a call was had with Jennifer Goldson and her team this week in order to move forward towards a late January RFP for review, in order to lead towards a potential spring RFP related to town meeting. I do see the chair of the select board here, if there's any more to that, but I believe that is the update in terms of where the timeline related to this project. I do know that a member of the planning board, as well as others, Housing Partnership Board and others, are being requested to be on that RFP team. So this group would be smaller than the group that would be for the Waterfield lot, based upon the complexity of that site in the town center, and the train station and the MWRA sewer line and many other access issues and whatnot. But so that's all I have in terms of an update of where we currently are and the timeline for where we're going. If anyone else wanted to elaborate.
So I guess we have 2 things before us tonight. One is to choose who amongst us would be on the RFP team, and the other is to determine how we go ahead with doing some sort of a design that would some sort of, I don't know what we called it in our last meeting, a charrette for that area, and have it done in time for it. Brian, did you provide us a date when they were hoping the RFP would go public? I can't recall. It was only 20.
No, but I mean, it would have to be in the February, March. So
happy to weigh in, Brian.
Please, Mike.
So we're looking at getting a first draft at the beginning of January and to issue the RFP at the very end of January. So it's a tight timeline here. It's a smaller group. One of the issues for us, it's different than Waterfield, is we're really only intending to take control of the property for a short period of time. So Waterfield, we owned it. We had the luxury of kind of waiting, and it was already had an existing use. But this one, we've got to, and we actually had a meeting of the Affordable Housing Trust tonight. So we've got to kind of work all of that into the system and keep it moving pretty quickly in order to get something out of it. But we certainly would welcome any contribution from the planning board. Ms. Golson had, recommended that we have a smaller, more nimble team for this one, but certainly we would welcome your participation.
So I have a thought. The charrette idea, it was much more of a public process, and it also involved stuff. We had 4, I believe, different architects for Waterfield. In this case, I think in the end, that was what I guess you'd say brought Dennis Carlone to our attention, because he was one of the 4. That was the first time we'd ever encountered Dennis Carlone, first time any of us, except for I suppose Mary McKenna, who was on the board and threw a whole bunch of names together, and that's how Dennis was brought to our attention. Anyway, in light of what he did for us, and also in light of what he's been, the work he's already doing, I'm thinking that maybe we should work with him, and here we are booking ourselves up already for January, but just see what kind of a schematic design, or very just something that would take advantage of the site, because he was working without public input really for the Waterfield site, but just was he understands the town very well. So I'm just thinking it works a lot better when an RFP goes out if there's something on paper. Now I did see just today or yesterday, or I don't know what it was, but for the first time there was another architectural firm. I think Dennis's work, frankly, is more. I don't know what to say. Anyway, we like Dennis's work. We've seen how successful it was with bringing in Civico, and there were other designs that built off Dennis's work that went into our CBD regulations. So I'm thinking, why don't we just ask for a schematic, maybe meet with us in early January and develop, or maybe not. Maybe just ask him if he can come up with some kind of a schematic. But we don't, in the last RFP for Waterfield, there was no schematic design, but it did refer to the design that was in the regulations for the PUDs. So that's my thinking, is just get something out there that's at a fairly sophisticated level. And I think we could do better than the one I just saw. As I say, I don't even have it in print. I never got it in a packet. I just saw it for the first time a day or 2 ago.
So Maureen, the other way we could do it as well is that, and Mike, you may not know, but Dennis Carlone is, like, we have him on call as our design consultant. And so what we could do, because that is going to be a missing component of this right now, the plans that are in place, we're really looking at how many units, and it was more of a strategy of for financial purposes versus actual boots to the ground strategy. So what if we actually just brought, given the time schedule and the constraints we're on, what if we brought Dennis Carlone on to be part of that as more of the design support along with Jennifer's office?
Sure, sounds good to me. I mean, he's excellent. It's too bad he's not still here. We could just bang this out right now and just start getting some sketches going, but
he knew.
Of course, yeah. I mean, Dennis, I mean, I think that, and it's why we chose Jennifer to work with as well, because we know that it's who the planning board prefers, and if you prefer Dennis to be part of it, I mean, obviously, I don't know anything about design, so we would welcome, that.
I think that would strengthen the outcome a lot, sure. And for very little money up front, it would do a lot. Jennifer mainly works in the world of writing, and the writing's good. As you know, we're very happy with her. Dennis works in the world of drawing, so they are different and complementary.
Yeah.
Perfect.
And we were going to use last week, we talked about using our budget to cover that.
Better yet, right, Mike?
Yeah,
of course.
The context for this, Michael, is that as we mentioned,
you're hard to hear.
Our discussions are. Oh, I'm sorry. The context for this is that the Waterfield lot could rely upon all of the work done for the CBD design, and we want to make sure that the Washington Swanton Street, that the design isn't just in the hands of the developers, but it does reflect something that we want the community to have a say in how it feels there. And so that's why we wanted to bring in the design consultant. I think Dennis is great. I think that we do have to ask him whether he has time for this as well as 654 Main. And I'm a little concerned that we have spoken numerous times in the past about bringing in more design people, and I know Brian has been doing a lot of work reaching out in the recent past, but we really need to get that process formalized and done so that when things pop up at the last minute, as they always do, that we can reach out and we have a backup, or we have just someone else we can pull in as our front person. So
well, as a follow-up, Diab, it was actually the site plan, more the urban design part, but I did think that Civico brought in a firm that I had proposed to Gillespie, and then Gillespie, and I think Heather knew who they were. They're in Providence. They're very, very good. But I think if Dennis can take it, that would be good. But the one Civico worked with, and I just don't have it handy. I didn't expect this, but they're excellent.
Yeah, I think we should bring them in to talk to them. But at this point, we're on a tight schedule, and I don't want to stop the select board train. Yeah. So let's jump on, and Brian, will you look if there's a problem? Let us know. I think it's coming in under. It'll be coming in under the dollar amount that we don't have to go out for bid, obviously. So, and we also already have him contracted in for services, but if he's unavailable, we'll have to come up with something quick.
Okay.
Well, I'm going to even go further and say, I'm sorry, I don't have it in front of me, but it is the firm in, I don't know, Mike, do you remember the firm that's based in Providence? They were part of Civico's team.
And also Red Lock Farm for their,
we did the new bar.
Oh, right. Yeah, so they've got a great record.
Yeah, but we've actually had responses from other people that Brian has reached out to, right?
Yeah, for historic consultants. So I don't know.
Oh, those were all historic. All the people.
Those are historic. Yeah, but
relevant here.
Yeah. Okay. I thought they were more for in general design consultants.
Anyway, let's maybe I'm going to say for everybody present, including Mike, let's see if Dennis can do it, and if not, let's go on to the Providence company.
Would that be an issue?
With that.
Yeah. The only question I have is that a conflict of interest?
Because they're working on Civico?
Well, we're hiring them not for a review, but rather to develop a site plan. I'm not sure.
That's my only question.
Well, let's say Civico chose to do the project, it would be. It pulls them out of the.
Okay, let's just see Dennis. Dennis, you know what? Another idea would be LDA, the architecture design firm that worked with Dennis. They were originally all part of the same company.
Yeah, LDA is fabulous as well.
Oh, good, Heather. Good. Okay, I'm with you.
Union Studio.
Yeah, Union Studio. That was it.
Yeah, that's
really
the.
LDA is really good.
3 votes.
So are we okay as a board? We probably should vote because there is money involved. Are you okay if someone did a motion to support Dennis Carlone participating as a design consultant regarding the water field and Swanton lot, and then if he's unavailable to then reach out to LDA?
Yes, but I think it's not participating. We really have to direct him, and Brian's going to have to do a real quick RFP. I mean, not RFP, a little bit of a contract. And the direction is for him to develop some kind of very conceptual urban design scheme for the Washington Swanton Street lot.
Yeah, I did. The plans that the select board had done had their land, I guess would be because they don't take it. They're just the plans. They don't go into materials or massing or height or because they really need it for financial purposes at that point.
Right. I think Dennis will know what to do. He'll take it and run.
Yeah, I mean it's a corner lot. It affects 2 very different neighborhoods. So there's a lot of context or contextual work that needs to be done, and Dennis will do that. So I'm perfectly fine with that, except I would correct it from Waterfield and Swanton to Washington and Swanton.
Oh, I'm so sorry. Yes.
just so Dennis knows what universe we're in.
All right. Well, did someone want to make that motion?
I move that we ask Dennis Carlone to provide us with design recommendations for the Washington and Swanton Street lot. And if he is not available, that we reach out to LDA, and that we have a deadline of January 15th.
Well, I changed design recommendations to a kind of conceptual design.
Okay, conceptual design.
By January 15th?
Well, that's a joke. That's a joke.
Good.
Well, the problem is that if the RFP is slated to go out by the end of January,
it's not.
That's a tight timeline. So
it's not going to be a conceptual design. It could be conceptual though.
It won't be on paper. So the question is, when is a realistic time to ask for this to be done? Should it needs to go?
Well, you don't need to put it in the vote. I think you can ask me to engage him, and we can go from there.
Okay, then I do not put it in the.
Okay, I'm going to second it.
Nancy, do you actually have
Yeah, it is.
Do you have that written?
Sort of.
So Deb, you're striking the date out of it.
Striking the date. Please, thank you.
So it's Dennis Carlone to provide us with conceptual design sketches for Washington Swanton. If he's unavailable, then the other option is LDA.
Yep.
Okay, yes.
So I'm just a little, this is Cheryl, I'm just a little confused. I thought that the idea behind this was because the RFP needs to go out by the end of January, that someone from our group was going to help work on the RFP. I think hiring someone, if we're not meeting until January 12th, is, I don't know how we're going to get it done by the end of January.
Well, we're giving Brian direction to go now to them.
Okay.
So they
I'm just going to keep, just based on experience I have with, I mean, obviously if it's Dennis, first of all, it's unclear if he would be able to do that, or anyone would be able to, over the holidays, do this. So I like that everyone has faith in me, and that makes me feel great.
There's more faith in Dennis.
but you know, starting it is December 15th. There probably isn't any worse time to say let's have a 1 month deadline. Like literally, there is not a worse time of the year to say let's have a 1 month deadline.
Well, there are also other facets of this, right? So we could do the developmental sketch, but it's also to have him participate in the RFP process, so attend the meetings. So there's two pieces, and if he can't do but can get to the meetings, and they can get into language what he visualizes in his head instead of on the paper. I mean, there's many different ways we can approach this. It's just to try to get this kind of conceptual in context.
I still think the written part will, I mean, Jennifer will come up with the big concepts, just the sorts of things Diab was saying, the two main elevations and the parking and is it mixed use and so on. That'll go into language. I really think we need sketches, and I believe Dennis can come up with sketches. Whatever, he'll tell us what he can do, but I guaranteed he was not born yesterday. He can go to the site and he can spend a day or two and come up with something, I'm sure.
Well, so I guess we as Cheryl, as you pointed out, we do still have to select, someone has to step forward to be on this RFP committee. But then also there is a realistic deadline that we would need. If the RFP is going to go out by the end of January, then January 15th isn't the drop dead date, but certainly we would like to have this work done if there are sketches going out with the RFP. So there is a hard deadline at some level.
Yeah, I would say that sketches are going to need to be reviewed at our next meeting, and so Brian should find out if Dennis even has the capacity to do that.
Yeah, because we have December 12th and December 26th. December 26th we've already discussed having for 654 Main Street, if possible. So
well, why does he have to come back to us?
He doesn't. I mean, I think the other option is that you know, that, you know, the RFP group really feels like it's helping us put our best foot forward in terms of making this a successful, you know, RFP, basically. I mean, we want to get people interested. It's not the idea that we're trying to limit the creativity and the ability for someone to imagine this site better than it is today. That's not hard at all. So it's, you know, there's plenty of things, there's plenty of reviews ahead of us with we just need to make sure that the RFP is successful, correct?
Yes.
Yep.
Actually, I'm
So-
not sure what kind of a role we'll have in it, so I think that ought to be really clear here.
Well, I think that with the one member of the board on the RFP committee and with Dennis providing design support, I think we will have at least in getting a good RFP out, I think that will be a significant benefit. What happens after the RFP comes out is up to the gods or someone. So I guess we are looking to have Dennis get direction from Brian and also the planning board member who was on the RFP committee, since those are the two people who will know best what's actually going on in the committee and will be able to respond to their any needs they have.
I think that's a good idea. I think since we have I have my orders here, I guess, to see whether Dennis is available. But then we still need to just, I think before we close for the night, I'm hoping we can get a representative to be on that RFP team.
Well, first of all, there's a motion on the table, and I would like you to reconsider it, Diab, and pull it out and just change it to Dennis Carlone to provide the Washington and Swanton Street Working Group conceptual drawings and or design support for a RFP.
That sounds good, Heather.
Yep.
So Heather, you're able to say I would welcome a motion, and I'll say so moved.
Well, Diab has to pull his first.
I have to, wait, first I have to agree to ditch my motion, so.
Yes, I know.
And I would, the Washington Swanton.
And or, Brian, and or, sketches and or design.
Yeah, and I would put, after that, change working group to the RFP working group.
Yep, that looks good. Anyway, Heather welcomed that motion. I said so moved.
Diab, did you pull yours?
Oh yeah, I said I did.
Okay, all right. Meister motion, is there a second?
I'll second this one.
All right, discussion, roll call vote, please.
Hannon, aye.
Darius, aye.
Meister, aye.
Wolf, aye.
Von Mering, aye. Motion passes 5-0. And then we need to decide who from our board is going to be working on that RFP working group.
So I asked Heather if you were interested, and your reaction?
No.
I would like to volunteer. This is Cheryl.
And I will step back as fast as possible, so I nominate Cheryl.
I would like to say though that I am interested. I just don't have the bandwidth currently with everything going on, so I shouldn't be. No, but it's just the bandwidth. Okay, Cheryl. I don't want to be anyone to think. Okay. So Cheryl would like to do it. Anyone else want to do it? Going once? Going twice? Cheryl, can you please be on the RFP working group? And Brian will probably be your point person. Brian, are you being the point person for that RFP working group?
Correct.
You know? Or is that going on? Is that the manager's office?
Oh, sorry. You mean am I gonna? No. For that RFP, I would imagine I will probably
be support staff on it.
Yeah, I think it's going to probably be Lisa and I administering that. The RFP technically comes out of the manager's office, but just like Waterfield, it was really Lisa and me. So, yeah.
Okay, so you'll keep us updated in your weekly updates.
And I'll circle back with Cheryl certainly before the 12th.
If you need anything from any of us, let us know.
Yeah, it's probably gonna be tomorrow, right?
I was about to say, how about tomorrow, Cheryl? So, yeah.
All right, have fun. Okay, so going onward, master plan implementation committee will have to pick up in January with everyone gone anyways. To post anything at this point isn't going to be very productive. But Brian did in the meeting minutes, in his notes for this meeting, he did talk about it. So he did bring up some overview and some updates of things he thought about regarding the implementation committee. So we'll bring that back into our meetings in January. Any other items not known at the time of the posting?
No, motion to adjourn.
There a second?
Second.
Can we have some discussion?
We can have a discussion.
I just want to say, I hope everyone has a great rest of the year, and I'll see you all next year.
Oh, yeah, thank you. Everyone have a very happy holidays. Roll call vote, please.
Hannon, aye.
Darius, aye.
Meister, aye.
Bullfight.
Von Mering, aye. Thank you so much to WinCam. Thank you, Brian. Thank you, Beth. Thank you, Nancy, and all the members of the planning board and all the members of the public that joined us. We will see you back on Zoom January 12th. Have a good night.
Thank you, Brian.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye.